The scent of pine and spiced cider hung thick in the air, but James Whitmore barely noticed. Inside the grand Charleston Civic Center, everything gleamed. Crystal chandeliers sparkled like stars, poinsettias overflowed from silver urns, and waiters moved like shadows in tuxedos. Outside, cold December air wrapped the historic streets in a light mist, but here inside, heat and holiday cheer pulsed like a stage performance. James adjusted the cuffs of his navy velvet blazer. He hated velvet. But Margaret Henley had insisted it was festive and timeless for the annual Christmas gala, and after 2 days of dodging her calls, he'd finally caved. "Smile, Mr. Whitmore," a photographer chirped as she passed. "You're the gala's crown jewel." James offered a quick, practiced smile. Then she was gone. He wasn't here for the applause, or the networking, or the 5-course dinner he wouldn't eat. He was here for Micah. His 6-year-old son stood beside him, dressed in a crisp little navy blazer and bow tie. His hand clutched James's larger one, but his eyes, those bright, curious eyes, drifted constantly toward the flickering lights, the mountains of desserts, the giant Christmas tree towering in the ballroom's center like something out of a fairy tale. "Dad," Micah whispered, tugging his sleeve. "Can I go see the candy table?" James knelt down, brushing his son's hair back. "Stay where I can see you, okay." Micah nodded, grinning, then darted off, weaving between sequined gowns and polished shoes with a child's natural immunity to formality. James straightened and reached for a glass of untouched champagne. The music swelled strings, soft jazz laughter. Every detail was flawless, and still it felt hollow. "Don't look so grim," came a sharp voice at his shoulder. Margaret Henley, dressed in emerald silk and diamonds that could retire half the city. "You're making the donors nervous." James gave a tight smile. "Let me guess. My table's too close to the kitchen." "Don't be smug." She sipped her drink. "They'll start whispering if you don't socialize. You've been hiding since Thanksgiving." "I've been working," he replied, scanning the room for Micah. Margaret lowered her glass. "Your wife's been gone 3 years. No one expects you to forget her, James. But Charleston is watching, especially tonight." He said nothing. She sighed, all pearls and pressure. "Just be seen. Smile. Dance with someone who has a last name ending in money or influence. We all play the game." He turned to face her fully. "Maybe I'm tired of games." Margaret arched an eyebrow, but before she could retort, James caught a flash of Micah's blazer disappearing down a side hallway. "I need to check on my son," he said simply, and left. The corridor was quieter, dimmer. Tinsel lined the walls, but the glitter didn't reach the corners. James walked past the coat check, then rounded the corner and paused. Micah was sitting on a bench across from the staff break room, his small legs swinging. Beside him sat a little girl in faded corduroy pants and a sweater 2 sizes too big. She was holding a single cookie in both hands, nibbling like it might vanish. Micah looked up and waved. "Dad, this is Sophia." James took in the scene with a flicker of curiosity. Sophia blinked up at him with cautious eyes. Her hair was tied back in a loose braid, and her sneakers had worn down soles. A paper cup of water rested on the bench beside her. Behind them, a janitor's cart sat, parked next to the break room door. "Hi, Sophia," James said gently. "She's here with her mom," Micah explained. "Her mom's cleaning the floors." James's eyes followed the sound of a bucket sloshing gently. Just around the corner, a woman emerged, mop in hand, moving with care not to make noise. Her face was flushed. Loose strands of dark hair framed her cheeks. She wore a Civic Center staff badge, Rosa Delgado, and the kind of weary focus he recognized. The kind that came from balancing too much and hoping no one noticed. The moment she saw him, her eyes widened, then narrowed. I'm sorry, she said quickly, wiping her hands on her apron. She wasn't supposed to be here. She was just sitting while I finished the hallway. James raised a hand, calm. It's fine. She's not in the way. Rosa hesitated. This is a private event. Guests don't usually... She didn't finish. Micah looked up at her. I gave her a cookie. We're just talking. James watched her body tense as if waiting to be reprimanded. You're working tonight? He asked. She nodded slowly. I pick up extra shifts during the holidays. They needed help with cleanup. Is it just the two of you? She paused. Yes. Micah looked between them and smiled. Sophia said she likes the tree. The big one in the ballroom, James asked her. Sophia nodded shyly. Micah lit up. Dad, can we show her? Rosa stepped in quickly. No, sweetheart. That's okay. We're not. James cut in gently but firmly. You're welcome to join us, both of you. Rosa looked at him like he'd offered to move the moon. I appreciate that, but we're fine here. Sophia deserves cocoa too, Micah said, tugging on her sleeve. The silence stretched. Just for a few minutes, James added. It's Christmas. Rosa's eyes flicked down to her daughter, who hadn't stopped looking at the cookie like it was treasure. Okay, she said softly. A few minutes? James offered her a smile, then led them down the hallway. The ballroom buzzed with color and sound, but in the quiet corner near the tree, it was just them. He waved over a server and ordered 2 hot cocos and a fresh plate of gingerbread men. Sophia's eyes sparkled. She took the cocoa carefully like it was glass. James watched her sip, then glanced at Rosa. Do you always work Christmas week? She nodded. Every year. Must be tough. She shrugged. I like seeing the decorations. My daughter gets to be warm. James looked away, jaw tightening. He hadn't thought about warmth as a luxury in years. You don't have to thank me, he said quietly. I wasn't going to, she replied, and something in her tone made him turn back. There was no sarcasm, just pride. Grace wrapped in steel. Micah leaned close to Sophia. This cocoa's magic. If you drink it slow, you get extra wishes. She giggled. Rosa blinked fast. James watched them, then leaned into her, lowering his voice. This may sound strange, but what are you doing tomorrow? She glanced up, wary. I might need help with a new project, he said. Short term. Pays better than janitorial. Admin work. Light hours. She stared at him. Why, she asked. He considered. Because my son sees something I don't. And he's usually right. Rosa looked back at Sophia, then at James, and though she didn't say yes, she didn't say no either. Across the ballroom, the tree twinkled above them all. If you enjoyed this video, comment 1 to let me know. If not, comment 2. Your thought mattered to me either way. James had never watched anyone drink cocoa like that. Sophia cradled the paper cup in both hands, blowing softly, eyes wide, as if afraid the warmth might disappear. Across from her, Micah dunked a cookie with theatrical flair, telling her about the reindeer he was sure he heard on the roof last year. Rosa sat beside her daughter, posture tight, as if her chair might give out at any second. James glanced between them. They didn't belong at this table according to everyone else in the room. But here they were, and something about it felt more right than anything he'd done all month. He hadn't noticed Sharon approaching until her voice cut cleanly through the moment. James. He turned to see her standing behind him, perfectly poised wine glass in hand, and a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Sharon Watkins, Charleston's most in-demand event planner, and Margaret Henley's right hand. I've been looking for you, she said. Eyes flicking briefly toward Rosa, then back to James. We were just enjoying some cocoa, he replied evenly. Sharon nodded her gaze, dropping to Sophia, then lingering on Rosa's badge. I see. Rosa stiffened. Is there a problem? James asked. No, Sharon said quickly. Of course not. Just wasn't expecting staff to be seated in guest areas. Before James could speak, Rosa stood. Her face was composed, but her voice carried weight. We should be going. Sophia looked up, startled. But Mama, thank you, Mr. Whitmore, Rosa said quietly, for everything. She took her daughter's hand and gently began to lead her away. Wait, James said, rising. Rosa paused, barely turning her head. She wasn't staff tonight, he said. She was my guest. Sharon's smile froze. The air around them stilled. I'll handle this, he added, not looking away from Rosa. Rosa hesitated. Sophia tugged on her mother's hand. Mama, can I finish the cookie? James waited. So did everyone else within earshot. Rosa gave a small nod. They returned to their seats without a word. Sharon lingered for a moment longer, then turned her heels, clicking sharply against the marble floor. I'm sorry, James said softly once they were alone again. Rosa shook her head. You don't have to explain. I do, he insisted. You didn't deserve that. I've had worse, she said, stirring her cocoa with the end of her spoon. That's the thing about being invisible. You get used to being looked through. James didn't know how to respond, so he watched Sophia lick chocolate from her fingers and listened as Micah asked if she wanted to see the choir that was about to sing. I should go clean the hallway, Rosa said, starting to rise again. No, James said more firmly this time. Stay, please. She looked at him. Just for a little longer. Her eyes held his, unsure, until Micah laughed, and Sophia joined him, the sound like bells ringing out in a quiet room. All right, she said. A little longer. The children slipped away toward the stage area, leaving the adults in a rare moment of stillness. I'm not used to people speaking up like that, Rosa admitted, folding her hands in her lap. Especially not people like you. James leaned back, hands in his pockets. I don't like seeing people pushed aside. She tilted her head. You live in a world that pushes people aside without even noticing. I know. There was no defensiveness in his voice, just honesty. Rosa studied him. Why did you really ask me to sit down? Not just for Micah's sake. He hesitated, then looked down at the cocoa in front of him. Because you seemed tired. She blinked. Tired. Not just physically. You had that look, like you've been holding everything together with thread. She smiled, just barely. That's an expensive observation. I've learned to pay attention, he said. She let out a slow breath. Well, you're not wrong. Silence settled between them, not awkward, just heavy with unspoken truths. You mentioned a project, she said, finally. What kind of project? A nonprofit I'm funding. Digital literacy. Workforce prep for women re-entering the job market. We're looking for someone local to help with admin scheduling, small logistics. And you thought of me. You stayed calm when someone tried to humiliate you, he said. That tells me more than a resume ever could. Rosa looked down at her hands. I don't want pity. It's not pity. Then what is it? James didn't answer right away. Across the ballroom, the choir began to sing soft, rising harmonies that filled the space with warmth. I think, he said, his voice quieter now, it's that I'm tired of living in a world where people like you go unseen, and I'd rather use what I have to change that just a little than pretend it's not happening. Rosa looked at him for a long moment. Then she nodded once, slowly. I'll think about it, that's all I ask. A server passed by with a tray of peppermint bark. Sophia ran back with 2 pieces in hand, offering one to Micah and one to her mother. Rosa smiled, accepting it. Thank you, sweetheart. Micah turned to James. Dad, can we do this every year? James looked at Rosa, then back at his son. Maybe more than once a year. Sophia beamed as the choir swelled into a soft, almost sacred version of Silent Night. James glanced at Rosa. She wasn't smiling exactly, but her shoulders had dropped. The tension had eased just a little. And in that moment, surrounded by flickering lights and voices rising in harmony, something inside James shifted. He wasn't sure what it was yet, but it felt like the start of something worth following, even if it scared him. The rain came softly the next morning, tapping against the single window in Rosa's apartment like a visitor too polite to knock. Gray light filtered through the curtains, falling across a narrow kitchen where time stood still. A half-empty cereal box leaned on its side. 2 chipped mugs sat in the sink. The heater rattled in bursts, trying its best. Rosa sat at the small table, still in her uniform pants and a faded long-sleeve tee. Her fingers wrapped around a mug that held more hope than coffee. Across from her, Sophia leaned over a coloring book, humming the same song the choir had sung the night before. Rosa couldn't stop replaying it all. The gala, the look in James's eyes when he offered her that job, the moment he stood between her and that woman Sharon, like he'd decided right then that she mattered. And she hated how much it shook her. She didn't want to owe anyone. Not again. Not after the last time. "Do you think Micah liked his cookie?" Sophia asked, without looking up. Rosa blinked. "I think he did." "Do you think we'll see him again?" She didn't answer right away. Sophia looked up, eyebrows scrunched in her serious way. "Mama, I don't know," Rosa said softly. "Maybe." The room went quiet again. The kind of quiet that made you notice every little thing, the crack in the wall, the fridge humming too loud, the soft ache behind your eyes. Rosa reached for the notepad she kept near the stove. The corner was stained from steam. On it she wrote 3 columns, work bills and rent. Her civic center shifts barely covered rent. If Andre cut her, New Year's hours, January would become a puzzle she couldn't solve. She stared at the blank underwork for a long time before scribbling 2 words, Whitmore Project. She underlined it, then quickly crossed it out. Sophia stood up and walked to the window. "It's raining." "No park today," No, Rosa said. "We'll do movie time later." The girl sighed, pressing her forehead to the glass. "I liked the cocoa. It was warm." Rosa turned away quickly, pretending to sip her mug again. She remembered warmth, once, years ago before everything unraveled. She had been 27, working the front desk at a small hotel in Myrtle Beach. Not glamorous, but stable. She had friends, a fiancé who promised her they'd build something together. They shared a plan. A baby came too soon. He didn't stay long after. He left with a truck full of promises and unpaid debts, and Rosa was left holding Sophia and every last responsibility. The eviction notice had come during Christmas week. She remembered standing outside the shelter that first night, holding a sleeping baby wrapped in a blanket, feeling like the whole world had stepped away from her and closed the door behind it. Since then, she hadn't allowed herself to hope for more than just enough. Enough food, enough work, enough heat to keep Sophia warm at night. So why had she let herself feel something last night? Why had James's words reached somewhere so well hidden even she had forgotten it was there? Her phone buzzed. She flinched. A text from Andre. "Need you at 2 p.m. for prep. Fancy brunch tomorrow. Lots of VIPs. Please don't be late." Rosa sighed, set the mug down and rubbed her temples. "Time to get ready, Carino." Sophia looked over. "Can I bring my drawing for Micah?" Rosa paused. "Let's wait, just in case." The Civic Center was quiet when Rosa arrived, the echo of her sneakers bouncing off the marble floor as she headed for the back. She passed the ballroom where the tables were already half set for the next event. Silver chargers gleamed under the lights, everything perfectly in place. She wasn't. Andre met her near the kitchen, clipboard in hand. "You okay?" he asked, eyes skimming her face. "I'm fine. Rosa said. Just tired. He nodded, not pressing. We've got a full menu. Shrimp and grits chicken and waffles, some fancy eggs thing I can't pronounce. VIPs from out of town, plus the mayor's staff. Think you can handle the main floor rotation? Rosa hesitated. I know it's more FaceTime, Andre added. But you're the only one I trust not to spill mimosas on a senator. She gave a faint smile. Okay. Thank you. As she changed into her uniform vest and apron, she caught her reflection in the mirror behind the coat hooks. Same tired eyes, same safe braid, same lines around her mouth from years of holding everything in. She adjusted the collar and squared her shoulders. The brunch was already buzzing by the time she stepped into the main hall. Jazz music played softly under the clink of cutlery. Waiters moved in precise rhythm. She balanced a tray with 3 flutes of cranberry juice and moved toward the corner booth. And stopped. James Whitmore was there. No blazer today, just a charcoal sweater sleeves rolled to the elbows, hands wrapped around a coffee cup like he actually meant it. Micah sat beside him, kicking his feet gently, and watching the room with the same curious eyes. Rosa froze. He looked up. Their eyes met. He smiled. Not the public smile. Not the one she'd seen him give photographers. This one was smaller, realer. Like he hadn't expected to see her but was glad he had. She turned quickly, pretending to look for another table. A moment later, Andre was at her side. You okay? She nodded too fast. That's your guy from last night, huh? He asked quietly. He's not my guy, she replied carefully, placing the drinks on a table. Didn't say he was. I don't want trouble. Andre lowered his voice. He requested you. Rosa turned sharply. What for table service? Said he hoped you were on shift. She stared at him. I'll switch you to back if you want. Andre offered. Say the word. Her hands clenched around the tray. No, she said after a pause. I'll take it. She approached slowly, keeping her steps even. Good morning, she said, setting 2 napkins down. James looked up, warmth in his voice. Morning. Micah grinned. Hi, Miss Rosa Sophia's drawing was sitting on the table. A crayon Christmas tree with 4 stick figures underneath Micah Sophia and 2 adults holding cocoa mugs. Rosa stared at it, heart thudding. I think she wanted you to have it, James said. She nodded, her voice too caught to answer. James studied her for a moment, then leaned slightly forward. I meant what I said, he murmured. The offer still stands? She swallowed. I'm not used to people meaning it. Well, he said, get used to it. A silence hung between them, charged, but not heavy. Something new was stirring. Something that scared her more than poverty, more than shame, more than all the nights she'd spent waiting for another door to close. Hope, and she didn't know what to do with it. If you enjoyed this video, comment 1 to let me know, if not, comment 2. Your thought mattered to me either way. The wind had picked up by the time Rosa stepped outside. The Civic Center's grand front entrance stood tall behind her, flanked by holiday banners fluttering against the overcast sky. Her apron was tucked beneath her arm, and the last remnants of brunch still lingered faintly on her skin, coffee, citrus, and cinnamon. She should have gone straight home. But she stood still on the sidewalk, clutching Sophia's drawing to her chest, like it might fall apart in the rain-cloud thick air. A car pulled up. Sleek, quiet. Black, of course. James stepped out. He wasn't supposed to be there. I was hoping I'd catch you, he said, leaving the door open behind him. I didn't want to text. She blinked. How did you ask, Andre? Of course. You didn't have to do that, she said, voice even. I know. His gaze flicked to the drawing still clutched in her hand. Can I walk with you? Rosa glanced at the time. Sophia wouldn't be out of her friend's apartment for another hour. She'd bargained a few extra playdates with her neighbor in exchange for helping her with laundry during the week. 5 minutes, she said. James fell into step beside her, matching her pace easily. The sidewalk was uneven, cracked in places. Charleston's charm wasn't always polished, but he didn't seem to mind. She noticed he kept to the side closest to the curb without thinking about it. They walked in silence for a block. I wasn't sure you'd talk to me today, he finally said. You asked for me, Rosa replied. That made it harder to avoid. His smile was soft. Fair. I still don't know what you want from me. I told you, help with the non-profit project. You could have picked anyone. I didn't want anyone, he said simply. I wanted someone who could see people the way they actually are. You do that. She didn't respond right away. Her hands tightened slightly on the paper in her grip. You think kindness means trust, she said. It doesn't. He looked at her a little caught off guard. She kept walking. It's easy to be kind when you've got something to spare. Kindness doesn't cost you anything. But trust, that's different. That's when you show up even when it's not convenient. That's when you let someone in, when you have every reason not to. James nodded, letting that sit between them. You're right, he said. I think I've been offering kindness and calling it connection. They reached a corner where a florist shop was closing up. Rosa stopped to let a delivery truck pass. James turned toward her. Would it help if I told you I'm scared too? She looked at him. I don't do this, he said. Whatever this is. Not since Micah's mom passed. Her expression softened, but only slightly. You're scared of me, she asked, a hint of challenge in her voice. I'm scared of wanting something real and not knowing how to build it anymore. Rosa exhaled. The street quieted again. A wind chime sang faintly above them. Do you know what people like me do when someone like you offers a hand? She asked quietly. James waited. We wait for the bill. The part where you want something in return, or where the kindness runs out, or where we're reminded we don't belong. I'm not here to collect anything. She nodded slowly, then looked down at the drawing. Sophia had drawn hearts around their stick figures, little stars above their cocoa mugs. Micah said cocoa makes wishes work if you drink it slow, she whispered, barely audible. James smiled at that. I think he's right. Rosa looked up at him again. You said the job offer was real. It is. She searched his face. You'd really want me working in your world? He didn't hesitate. No. I want to build something that fits yours too. The tension in her jaw loosened. Just a little. Then maybe she said we start with coffee. Not cocoa. That's for the kids. She said, the barest trace of a smile at her lips. He nodded, heart beating faster than he expected. She turned to go, then paused. I'll text you. You have my number. Micah gave it to Sophia. She called over her shoulder. On a napkin, in crayon. James laughed under his breath. The door to the florist shop swung open again as the wind picked up, bringing with it the scent of crushed rosemary and rain. He stood there for a moment longer, just breathing it in. The following afternoon, Rosa sat across from her neighbor, Carmen, in the small kitchen they often shared for dinner. Carmen glanced at the half-eaten plate in front of her. You didn't finish your rice. You sick? No, Rosa said, staring at her phone. Carmen squinted. What's that face? Rosa blinked and looked up. What face? The one where you're trying to look calm, but inside you're arguing with yourself. Rosa pushed her plate away. I ran into James Whitmore again. Carmen dropped her fork. The billionaire. He's complicated. He's rich. That's already complicated. Rosa let out a tired laugh. Carmen leaned in. Did he ask you out? No, but he wants to. He offered me a job. Carmen's eyes widened. You're taking it right, I don't know. Why not? Rosa hesitated. Because I don't know what world I belong in anymore. Carmen grew quiet. Then she reached out and took Rosa's hand gently. You belong in the one where your daughter has hot meals, where you can sleep without checking the lock twice, and where someone looks at you like you're not a burden. That world. Rosa nodded slowly. Later that night, after Sophia had fallen asleep, Rosa opened her phone and pulled up the draft message she'd written 3 times and deleted twice. She reread the words, heart racing. Let's meet for coffee. No promises. Just conversation. Her finger hovered over send. And then she tapped. It was quiet in the apartment. But something had shifted. She didn't feel safe exactly. She felt brave. And maybe that was enough to begin. The cafe sat on the corner of a quiet street, tucked between a bookstore and a florist that always smelled like lavender and lemons. It wasn't trendy or overly charming, just warm. Worn wood floors, mismatched chairs, a slow jazz playlist drifting from somewhere unseen. The kind of place where people lowered their voices and lingered over one cup longer than they meant to. James was already there when Rosa arrived. He stood as she stepped through the door instinctively. He wore a soft gray sweater collar open a little less polished than usual, like he was trying to meet the day where it was instead of overpowering it. You found it, he said, smiling. She nodded, tugging off her scarf. I used to come here when Sophia was a baby. There's a bench across the street where I'd sit with her for hours. Why'd you stop work? Time. Life. She gave a small shrug. When things fall apart, small comforts are the first to go. He held her gaze a moment longer, then gestured to the corner table he'd chosen. It faced the window. Afternoon light spilled across the wood, catching in her hair as she sat. I didn't order yet, he said. Wasn't sure what you liked. Black? No sugar? He raised a brow. Of course. When he returned with 2 steaming mugs, Rosa was staring out the window watching a couple walking their dog. You ever wonder what it feels like to have a normal kind of life? She asked softly. James set the mugs down gently. Every day. She turned toward him, surprised. I know how it looks from the outside, he said. But normal, family dinners, spontaneous movie nights a morning without a calendar alert. I haven't had that in years. What happened? She asked before she could stop herself. James wrapped his hands around his mug. The ceramic was warm. My wife passed away 3 years ago. Complications after a surgery. We didn't see it coming. Rosa's breath caught. I'm sorry. He nodded once, his expression unreadable. Micah was 3. I didn't know how to be enough for him. Still don't. You seem like a good father. I try. But I've made a lot of decisions with fear, with distance. Rosa studied him. What do you mean I kept him close but kept the world out? And somewhere along the way I forgot how to let anyone new in. She sat back, processing. I know what that's like, she said. He looked up. I built walls too, she continued. Not because I didn't want connection, but because every time I reached for it, something fell through. Or someone did. Their eyes held something unspoken tightening between them. A server passed behind them, humming quietly. A bell above the door chimed as someone else came in, but neither of them looked away. James broke the silence gently. What was your dream? Rosa blinked. What before everything? Before survival? She hesitated. I wanted to run a children's bookstore, she said, the words sounding foreign now, with a little corner for storytelling and hot chocolate, maybe community events, safe space for kids who didn't always have one. He smiled. That's Exactly right. Right, he nodded. Right for who you are. Her throat tightened unexpectedly. She hadn't heard someone say that in years, maybe ever. And you? She asked, voice quieter now. What was yours I wanted to teach? Really, high school history. Before tech found me and pulled me in. You still could. James laughed low. Can you imagine me in front of a classroom? I think you'd be more at home there than in those boardrooms. His eyes crinkled. That might be the most honest thing anyone said to me in a year. They sat in the warmth of that moment for a while. No rush, no expectations. But then Rosa's phone buzzed on the table. She glanced at it and frowned. What is it? James asked. She hesitated. Carmen, my neighbor. She was watching Sophia. Said someone from the paper called her looking for a quote about us. James stilled. About us? She nodded. Apparently someone saw us at brunch. The gala. Word got around. He looked away, jaw tightening. I should have seen that coming. Rosa sat straighter. They called her Home Line James. Her house. That's not okay. No, it's not. I have a daughter. I can't have people chasing us around for stories. I understand. She took a breath, trying to steady herself. I didn't sign up for attention, or whispers, or whatever this might become in the headlines. I'll make some calls, he said. I'll have it shut down. I can try? She shook her head, lips pressed tight. This is why I paused. Why I almost didn't come today. Because part of me knew your world comes with noise, with exposure. I won't let it hurt you, he said quietly. You can't promise that. I can promise I'll stand with you if it does. Rosa looked down at her coffee untouched. The steam had thinned. I don't want to disappear, she said. But I don't want to be swallowed either. He reached across the table, not touching her, but close. We don't have to rush this, he said. There's no script, no expectation. She looked up, unsure. I meant what I said, James continued. I'm not offering a favor. I'm offering a chance for something mutual, real. Her breath hitched. Outside the window, the couple with the dog had turned the corner. A child skipped behind them, chasing a red balloon. I just need to move slowly, she said. I'll move with you. She stared at him for another long second. Then finally she reached for her mug and took a sip. It was bitter strong. Real. And she didn't flinch. It had been 4 days since the cafe. 4 days of quiet texts and careful steps. 4 days of Rosa checking the front page of the Post and Courier every morning, half expecting her name to appear in some glossy holiday gossip column. It hadn't yet. But the silence didn't make her feel safer. It made her wait for the crack beneath her feet. She stood outside the brick office building on Queen Street, heart thudding. The address James had given her wasn't what she expected. It wasn't some glossy skyscraper or cold modern loft. It was tucked between an old law firm and a vintage music store with hand-painted signage on the glass that simply read, Bridgeway Initiative Local Futures Real Change. Rosa exhaled, smoothed her blouse, and opened the door. A soft chime rang. The space inside was small but bright. An exposed brick wall on one side, shelves, lined with books and printed guides on the other. A cluster of desks in the back one, with a vase of dried eucalyptus. And in the center, a long table covered in folders, sticky notes, and 2 untouched cups of coffee. James looked up from one of the chairs and smiled. You came? I said I would. I know. But I also know what it took to say yes. He stood moving a few folders aside. I thought we'd go over the project today, see how it feels. Nothing locked in yet. She nodded, still scanning the room. This isn't what I pictured. In a good way or a bad way, in a human way. James chuckled. That's what I was going for. He offered her a seat across from him. We've been trying to pilot a program job training financial literacy digital skills for single parents and women who've been out of the workforce. Real things, not just theory. Rosa folded her hands in her lap. And you think I can help with that? I think you've lived what we're trying to solve. And I think that's worth more than any consultant with a resume full of buzzwords. She looked down, unsure how to hold that kind of praise. We'd start small, he continued. 10 hours a week, organizing events, reviewing materials, helping shape how we talk to the community. You'd be a voice we actually need. Would I be staff? You'd be paid. Regular hours. Title if you want one. Rosa hesitated. And what about the press? James's expression darkened slightly. I've asked for a freeze on any mention. Sharon wasn't happy, but she understands it'll cost her more to cross that line. She still works with you, Margaret, mostly. I've been pulling back, quietly. Rosa nodded slowly. Okay. A beat. Okay, as in, I want to try. James smiled, gentle, not triumphant. Then we'll go slow, just like you asked. That afternoon, Rosa stayed for 3 hours. They went over mock-ups, old program feedback, and event plans for January. He showed her the donor pitch slides, then laughed and pushed them aside when she wrinkled her nose. I know. Too glossy. It's not that she said, pointing to a slide. But if you're trying to help women feel seen, maybe don't use stock photos of models in designer suits. James leaned back, watching her. This is why I need you. She tried to fight the smile tugging at her lips. By the time she left, the sun was lower in the sky, casting long shadows on the sidewalk. She had a folder in her hand, and a number to call if she wanted to schedule more hours. For the first time in years, she walked home, not with dread, but with direction. At dinner, Sophia asked if they were rich now. No, Rosa said, laughing. But maybe one day we'll be... Okay. Sophia smiled, then went back to coloring the same tree she'd drawn at the gala, only now she was adding tiny presents beneath it. One box was labeled Hope. The next few days fell into a new kind of rhythm. Rosa started part-time at Bridgeway, arriving mid-mornings after getting Sophia to school, and picking up evening shifts only twice a week now, instead of 5. James didn't hover, but he noticed everything. He brought her tea when he saw she hadn't eaten. He left sticky notes with questions instead of interrupting her thoughts. He invited her to join meetings without expectation, always glancing her way when donors spoke, as if her reaction meant more than the money. On Friday, Rosa stayed late, reviewing training materials. The office emptied one voice at a time until only James remained in the conference room typing quietly. At 6:43, he stood in the doorway. You hungry? She looked up. That obvious. There's a little place 2 blocks over. They do incredible sweet potato soup. Come with me. Rosa hesitated. It's just soup, he said. No strings? She smiled. That's what people always say before there are strings. James held up his hands. No strings, no flashbulbs, no formal invites, just soup and cornbread, he added. That's non-negotiable. She laughed, really laughed, and stood. The restaurant was warm and dim with soft lighting and a chalkboard menu above the register. James ordered for them both, like he knew what comfort tasted like. They sat in the back near a small fireplace, the table barely big enough for their elbows. The soup was everything he promised, thick, spiced healing. Halfway through, James looked up. Can I ask something personal? Rosa wiped her mouth with a napkin, then nodded. Why haven't you let anyone in, Rosa? She froze. Before this. Before me. Anyone her spoon hovered. Because every time I let someone close, she said slowly, they needed something I didn't have. Patience. Forgiveness. Money. Or they just left. James watched her, his face open. I'm not looking for anything you don't already carry. And what do I carry? Strength, he said. Compassion. a steady kind of love, the kind most people forget how to give. She looked away, throat tight. Outside, the wind moved against the glass like a whispered warning. "I don't know if I can offer love," she said finally. "I'm not asking for it yet," James said softly. "Just asking to sit across from you a while longer." Rosa reached for her spoon again, but her hand lingered on the table. And for the first time, she didn't pull it away when his fingers brushed against hers. Rosa walked into Bridgeway the following Monday feeling different. Not lighter exactly. She still had her bills, her questions, her caution. But something in her chest had shifted. A softness, a steadying. Like the part of her that always braced for disappointment had sat down just for a moment and let the quiet in. She set her bag down by her desk and glanced toward the conference room. Empty. The light was on the windows aglow with that soft golden spill that only came in late December mornings, but James wasn't inside. The chair where he usually sat was pushed back a mug, left half full. She turned toward the small break area in the back. There he was, shoulders slightly hunched, reading something on his phone, brow furrowed. She leaned gently against the doorframe. "If that's the news, you might want to put it down before it ruins your mood." James looked up, startled for a second, then smiled. "It's not the news. Though, I probably need to stop starting my day with headlines." "Try music instead," Rosa said, stepping inside. "Something with horns." "Old soul?" He raised an eyebrow. "Like Al Green. Exactly like Al Green." James tucked his phone into his pocket. Noted. She poured herself a cup of the terrible office coffee and leaned back against the counter. "You look tired," she said, watching him. "I didn't sleep well. Work." He hesitated. "Family." Rosa studied him. "You don't talk much about them. There's not much to say," he said quietly. "My father's in Boston. We talk through attorneys more than phones. My mother passed when I was in college. And Micah's mom." A long pause. "She was strong," James said, eyes distant. "Too strong for how much pain she carried. She smiled for everyone else and folded when no one was looking." Rosa didn't speak, just waited. She didn't tell anyone how bad it got. Not even me. She thought asking for help made her a burden. A beat. I think about that all the time. Rosa set her cup down. "You tried, I can see that. Trying doesn't always mean succeeding," he said. "No," she agreed softly. "But it counts." He looked at her then. Really looked. "You know, sometimes I wonder what you would have been like in a different life," he said. "If we'd met with no baggage, no wounds." She tilted her head. "You think that version of me would have been easier?" "No," he said. "I think she might have been less guarded. But not better. Not more." Her breath caught. "And what about you?" she asked. "Would you be different?" James shook his head slowly. "I think I needed the cracks to see clearly. I used to chase perfection, perfect numbers, perfect image, perfect timing. Now I just want quiet truth." "Careful," Rosa said, smiling faintly. "That kind of talk makes a woman think you're serious." "I am." They held each other's gaze a moment too long before James blinked and stepped aside. "Come with me," he said. "I want to show you something." Rosa followed him into the back hallway, where a door she hadn't noticed before led to a narrow stairwell. They climbed quietly until they reached a rooftop deck surrounded by low brick walls. Wind swept her curls gently as she stepped into the open air. "This is our escape hatch," James said, gesturing toward the modest wooden benches and the string lights that zigzagged above them. "Staff come here when it's too loud inside." "It's beautiful," Rosa whispered. "Peaceful." He handed her a folded sheet of paper from his pocket. "This came in this morning." She opened it carefully. A grant application approved. A 6-month funding extension for the program specifically noting the value of its community engagement, and the revamped design led by Rosa Martinez. Her lips parted. Wait, what I submitted it 2 weeks ago. I used your notes, your layout. They loved the direction. She looked up, eyes wide. You didn't tell me. I didn't want to pressure you. But you're already making this stronger, whether you see it or not. Rosa folded the paper slowly. I've never had my name on anything like this. Get used to it. She turned to face him, the breeze pushing a strand of hair across her face. This scares me. I know. What if I mess it up? James stepped closer, careful not to push too far. You won't, and if I do, then we learn and keep going. Together. She didn't answer right away. The moment stretched taut with possibility. Below them, the street bustled with the start of holiday rush, horns, bells, laughter. But up here it felt like another world. Then, without warning, her phone buzzed. She pulled it from her coat pocket and frowned. It's Carmen, she said. She never calls during the day. Go ahead, James said, stepping back slightly to give her space. Rosa answered, Hey, is everything okay? Carmen sounded breathless. Rosa, you need to get to the school. It's Sophia. What happened? Rosa's voice shot up in pitch. She's okay, just something with her class project. A reporter showed up asking questions about the Christmas gala. The principal wants to talk to you. Rosa's stomach dropped. They went to the school. I told them nothing. But Sophia's upset. I'm coming. She ended the call, hands trembling. James stepped forward again. What's going on? They went to her school, James. Her voice cracked. A reporter. My daughter's school. That wasn't supposed to happen. His expression darkened. That crosses a line. I'll fix it. You can't just fix everything with a call. Watch me. No, she snapped. This isn't about control. It's about boundaries. You wanted to help. This is the part where you let me handle what's mine. He stepped back, stunned. I'm not mad at you, she added quickly, voice softening. But I need to protect her. That's always going to come first. James nodded, swallowing hard. I understand. She clutched the grant paper tighter, then turned toward the stairwell. I'll be in touch, she said. And before he could answer, she was gone. The principal's office smelled like old wood polish and peppermint. A snowman decoration sat lopsided in the corner, its eyes half peeled off from years of storage. Rosa stood by the window arms, folded, her reflection caught faintly in the glass. Sophia sat on the small couch behind her legs, swinging, clutching her backpack like a shield. Across the desk, Principal Harris spoke with a calm, measured tone that didn't soften the weight of her words. The woman claimed she was doing a piece on community impact, said she was profiling families from the gala. Rosa's jaw tightened. But she asked about my daughter. She asked Sophia who James Whitmore was to her, if he'd bought her gifts, if Rosa had been offered anything in return for their relationship. Sophia didn't understand the question, and frankly, neither do I. Rosa exhaled through her nose, slow and sharp. I didn't authorize any interview. I would never, we know, Principal Harris said quickly. And to be clear, the school does not condone any unauthorized interactions between students and media. Security escorted the woman off campus. We've also flagged the incident with district authorities. Rosa nodded once, still gripping her coat in one hand like a rope. We just wanted you to hear it from us first, Harris added gently. Sophia's fine. She was a little shaken, but she handled herself beautifully. You've raised a brave girl. Rosa's eyes flicked toward her daughter. Can I take her home? Of course. We'll count it as excused. When they were finally in the car, Sophia sat silent in the passenger seat. Her fingers picked at the frayed strap on her backpack. Did I do something wrong? She asked, voice barely above a whisper. No, baby, Rosa said, reaching across to tuck a curl behind her ear. You didn't do anything wrong. But the lady said I shouldn't lie about who you know. She was wrong to say that. Are we in trouble? No, Rosa said softly. But someone crossed a line. And when people cross lines, sometimes we have to remind them where they are. Sophia nodded, still uncertain. Rosa pulled her in gently and held her close. The kind of hug that anchored both of them at once. Later that evening, after Sophia had fallen asleep watching a holiday cartoon, Rosa sat at the kitchen table with her phone lit up in her hand. One unread message. James, if I heard. I'm so sorry. Please let me know if I can do anything. She stared at it for a long time. She didn't want to be angry at him, but she was. Not because he meant harm, but because his world operated with assumptions, with access, with reach. Her world didn't have those things. Her world had always been built around keeping the door locked. The phone bill paid the noise low. And now, because of one man's attention, kind unintentional, but still loud, her daughter had become a story someone else thought they had a right to tell. She typed a reply, deleted it, then typed again. Rosa, I know you didn't cause this, but it came from your world, and I need time to decide if I can live near that noise again. She hovered, then sent it. The next morning, James stood on the back deck of his house, coffee untouched, staring out at the marsh behind the property. The air was still thick with the scent of salt and pine. Micah came outside, barefoot pajama sleeves bunched at his wrists. Did Rosa write back? He asked. James turned. Yes. Is she mad? No, James said, crouching to meet his son's eyes. She's hurt, and she has a right to be. Micah tilted his head. Because of the reporters, yeah. Someone didn't respect her space. Micah sat on the steps beside him. But she's not famous. Why would they care? James looked away, ashamed, because sometimes people care more about a good story than a good person. That's dumb. James smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Yeah, it is. Micah rested his chin in his hands. Do you think she'll come back? I don't know. A long silence settled between them. Then Micah asked, Did Mom ever get mad at you like that? James's heart pulled. Sometimes. What did you do? I tried to listen. And not fix it. Just let her be mad if she needed to be. Micah nodded, like that made sense in a way adults forgot. Back at Bridgeway, the office felt quieter. Rosa's desk sat empty, though she hadn't officially quit. Her sticky notes still decorated the side of the monitor, and the mug she brought from home, chipped blue porcelain, still sat in the dish rack. James walked past it with a weight in his chest that hadn't been there since the funeral. He went into the conference room and opened his laptop. He pulled up the media log, scanned the flagged inquiries, and saw the name of the reporter, a freelancer with a track record of provocative community interest pieces. Without a second thought, he forwarded the information to their legal counsel with a short note. No interviews granted. No statements authorized. Any mention of Rosa Martinez or her daughter must be pulled from publication. He stared at the blinking cursor for a moment, then added, If anything prints, we respond loud. Then he closed the laptop and sat in the stillness. That afternoon, Rosa returned to her usual grocery store. Same aisle, same coupons. She moved slowly, methodically, like muscle memory carried her forward. At the checkout line, she paused as Sophia slipped a small chocolate bar onto the conveyor belt. Rosa opened her mouth, ready to say they couldn't afford it, but then remembered the Bridgeway grant. She let it pass. As they walked toward the parking lot, a voice called from behind. Excuse me, Ms. Martinez? Rosa turned slowly. It was the school librarian, Mrs. Franklin, soft-spoken kind, always smelling faintly of vanilla and paper. I just wanted to say thank you, she said. Rosa blinked. For what? For how you handled everything this week? For raising a girl who knows how to speak clearly and stand tall? Rosa smiled, something tight in her chest, loosening. She's stronger than I ever was at that age. She's watching you, Mrs. Franklin said. And learning. Rosa nodded, quietly moved. That night after Sophia was asleep, she sat on the couch with the lights low and her phone in her lap. She opened James's message again. This time she didn't overthink it. Rosa, I'm not ready to walk away, but I need a few things to change if this continues. For me. For her. His response came less than a minute later. James, say the word and I'll change them. Just keep the door open. She stared at the screen, heart thudding. Then she typed slowly, Rosa, doors open. But it swings both ways, James. I need to see you walk through it, too. And for the first time in days, she let herself breathe. It rained the next morning. The kind of cold, steady rain that seemed to slow the whole city down. Streets shimmered under headlights, puddles formed in gutters, and people moved with hunched shoulders and umbrellas that flipped in the wind. Rosa stood by the window in her small kitchen, watching the water streak down the glass. Sophia was at school, bundled in her favorite purple coat, and the silence in the apartment felt thicker than usual. But it wasn't a heavy silence. It was waiting. Her phone buzzed. James, can I pick you up? I'd like to show you something. It's not work, just something real. She stared at the message for a beat, then typed back, Rosa, only if you bring coffee. The good kind? His reply came with a smile emoji and a promise. 20 minutes later, he pulled up in front of her building, stepping out with 2 paper cups in hand and rain already soaking through the shoulders of his coat. I told you not to get out, she said as she climbed in. And miss my dramatic rescue entrance never. She rolled her eyes, but her mouth betrayed her with a smile. The drive was quiet at first. Music played low from the speakers, Ella Fitzgerald humming something soft and nostalgic. Where are we going? She asked finally. You'll see. He turned off King Street and headed west, away from the city noise toward the edges of town, where brick gave way to trees and neighborhoods felt more like memory. When they pulled into the small gravel lot of a community center, Rosa looked at him. This is where you bring me on a rainy day, trust me. He led her through the double doors into a space that smelled like lemon cleaner and old books. Inside, folding tables had been set up with colorful paper glue sticks, crayons, and markers. A group of children, maybe a dozen, sat drawing snowflakes and reindeer giggling as they compared their work. Volunteers moved gently between them 2 retired teachers, a college student with red hair, and Mrs. McNeil, who stood at the far end of the room directing traffic like a general in pearls and sneakers. Rosa blinked. What is this? It's part of Bridgeway's holiday partnership. Quiet program, low publicity. Just a warm place for kids after school who need it. He looked over at the kids, his tone softer now. I thought you'd want to see it before the press tries to turn it into a photo op. Rosa looked around slowly. The walls were decorated with children's art. There were plastic tubs of mittens and scarves by the door. A corner had beanbags and donated books. A few kids waved at James. One girl came up and handed him a paper star. For your tree, she said before skipping off again. James handed it to Rosa, with a small smile. She said that last year, too. Rosa turned it over. On the back, written in blocky letters, was one word: hope. She stared at it for a long time. Mrs. McNeil spotted her and waved them over. Well, look what the rain dragged in, she teased. You brought company, Whitmore. This is Rosa, James said. She's helping. Mrs. McNeil eyed Rosa warmly. You're the one he doesn't stop talking about. Rosa flushed. That sounds exaggerated. Sweetheart, I've known that man for 10 years. I've seen him pitch billion-dollar projects without blinking. But the minute your name comes up, he turns human. Rosa glanced at James, who looked faintly embarrassed. Well, we could use extra hands if you're staying, Mrs. McNeil added. Rosa didn't hesitate. I'll help with the reading corner. She spent the next hour seated on a floor mat with 3 kids who argued about whether reindeer could swim and whether Santa's sleigh had seatbelts. She laughed more in that hour than she had in a month. James stayed near the tables, helping a boy fix his snowflake's torn edge. When it was over, and the kids had been picked up one by one, Rosa stood at the back door under the awning, waiting for the rain to ease. James joined her hands in his coat pockets. You were good with them. I forgot how much I love that chaos, she said. It's the kind that doesn't wear you down. It just fills the space. He nodded. You used to want a children's bookstore, right? She turned toward him slowly. How do you remember that? Because you said it like it was still alive. Like it hadn't left you. Rosa didn't answer right away. The rain made soft tapping sounds against the awning. I always thought I needed more stability to even dream about it, she said. But maybe it's the dream that creates the stability. James looked over at her, searching her face. I have a space, he said. What a property. It's near Avondale. Small retail front, nothing fancy. I've been holding on to it thinking I'd open something useful there, but maybe I was just waiting for the right idea. Her eyes narrowed slightly. James, I'm not offering it as a gift, he said quickly, but as a partner. Business, real. You write the proposal, we build it. You lead. I invest. Rosa stepped back, almost laughing in disbelief. You want to open a bookstore? With me? A bookstore and community reading room. You said it yourself. A safe place for kids, maybe coffee. Events. You decide. She stared at him, heart pounding. You don't even know if I'm good at running anything. I know you care enough to make it work. And I know what the world becomes when people like you have a platform. Her throat was tight again. Always tight with him, like emotion lived too close to the surface. You make it really hard to stay mad at you, she said, her voice catching. He gave her a lopsided smile. Is that a yes? It's a... Maybe. I'll take it. She glanced out at the rain, then back at him. James, yeah, if we do this, the bookstore, the work, even us, I need to know you're not just doing it to fix something. I don't want to be a cause. You're not. Then what am I? He stepped closer, close enough that their shoulders almost touched, but not quite. You're the first thing in a long time that feels like it could last. Rosa looked away, overwhelmed. The rain had started to let up. And for the first time, she didn't feel the need to run from the quiet. She just stood in it with him, letting it soak in, letting the door stay open. The following week unfolded like a scene Rosa never thought she'd be part of. Each morning, she dropped Sophia off at school, then met James at the small corner property in Avondale. The storefront had peeling green paint, foggy windows, and the faded memory of an old sandwich shop still ghosting the glass Tommy's subs since '89. But where most people would have seen decay, Rosa saw a beginning. The first time she stepped inside, she closed her eyes and tried to imagine it. Bookshelves along the back wall, a reading nook with overstuffed cushions, low tables for kids, a community board near the front, maybe a small counter for coffee, nothing fancy, just warm enough to gather strangers into something more. She opened her eyes and found James watching her. You see it, don't you? Rosa nodded. It's already alive in my head. That day they walked the space together, measuring corners, discussing layout, scribbling ideas on a shared notepad. They debated colors, tile patterns, even the name. "The nest," Rosa said almost shyly, as they stood beside the old walk-in freezer. James turned to her. "Why that?" "Because it's small, warm, safe, a place to land when the world's too loud." He stared at her like he was learning something new all over again. "It's perfect." They began drafting the pitch. Rosa worked into the evening sketching the layout on graph paper, while Sophia colored beside her. She wrote about community, about dignity, about how stories saved her when no one else could. James handled the logistics, zoning paperwork, contractor bids, timeline estimates, but he always brought every detail to Rosa first. One morning he handed her a folder. "These are potential donors, small businesses, neighbors. I thought we could visit together, make this personal." Rosa raised an eyebrow. "You want to fund this without your money?" "Partly mine," he said, "but mostly theirs. If the community builds it, they'll protect it. That matters more than speed." Rosa flipped through the names cafes, a local printer, a retired teachers club. "This feels big," she whispered. James smiled. "It is." Later that afternoon, Rosa walked back into Bridgeway after skipping a few days to focus on the bookstore pitch. She had expected her desk to feel cold again, but instead she found a small note on top of her keyboard. "We missed your voice." "Welcome back." "Mem." She smiled, folding the paper heart warmed. Just then, Margaret Henley appeared in the hallway, her heels tapping out a rhythm that felt louder than it needed to be. Well. She said, her voice laced with a politeness that scratched the edges. "Look who's back in the office." Rosa turned careful to keep her posture calm. "Good afternoon, Margaret. I suppose I should congratulate you. Your little project seems to have taken flight." "It's not little," Rosa said gently but firmly. "And it's not just mine. It belongs to this community." Margaret laughed lightly. "Of course. Though it's funny. I don't recall Bridgeway running a formal initiative for bookstores." Rosa held her gaze. "Some things don't need to be run through red tape to matter." "Oh, I agree," Margaret said, stepping closer. "But you'll want to be careful. Visibility attracts attention. Not all of it good." Rosa's stomach twisted. "You're warning me, I'm reminding you," Margaret said with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "The world James walks in doesn't forget easily, and it doesn't like when people rise without permission." Rosa clenched her jaw, but kept her tone even. "Is that how you see me rising without permission?" Margaret tilted her head. "Just stay aware, dear. Stories are currency. Some people sell them, some people become them." Then she walked off, leaving Rosa standing there, skin prickling. That night, Rosa sat across from James in a quiet booth at a diner they'd discovered just off Savannah Highway, the kind of place with warm pie, cracked leather seats, and a waitress who called everyone honey. She picked at her fries, thoughts cloudy. James noticed. "What happened, Margaret?" she said simply. He sighed. "What did she say now?" "That I'm becoming a story. She's jealous. She's right," Rosa said. "I'm becoming something people talk about. And I don't know if I'm ready for that." James leaned in. "You don't owe anyone silence, Rosa. You've spent too long surviving in the shadows. You deserve to be seen." "But what if I get it wrong?" she asked. Voice small. "What if I fail in public, then you fail? And we get back up. In public." She looked down her fingers, tracing the rim of her water glass. "I didn't come this far to be someone's headline," she whispered. "You're not a headline," James said. "You're the story that changes how the others get written." She exhaled slowly, trying to believe it. On the way out of the diner, as they stepped into the cool air, James reached for her hand. This time Rosa didn't hesitate. She let his fingers intertwine with hers, grounding her. They didn't speak on the ride home. But as he pulled up in front of her building, she turned to him. "I want this bookstore. I want it more than I've let myself want anything in years. Then we'll build it. And I want—" She hesitated, heart thudding. "I want us. But only if it can live outside your world too, not just inside it." James nodded, his voice low. "It will. Because I'm not building my world anymore, Rosa. I'm trying to build ours." She stared at him for a moment, then leaned in slow, deliberate, and kissed him on the cheek. "I believe you," she whispered. And for the first time, it didn't feel terrifying to say it. It felt like home. 3 days before Christmas, Rosa stepped into the nest's future home and froze. The walls had been primed. The new shelves, custom-built by a local carpenter, leaned neatly in stacks, ready to be mounted. There were boxes of books waiting in the back, donated by neighbors and friends, their spines peeking out in all colors and genres. It was starting to look real, tangible, hers. But something was wrong. James was inside, pacing with his phone pressed to his ear. His face was tight, voice low and clipped. When he noticed Rosa, he turned away, finishing the call with a quiet, "Understood. Call me if it hits print." He tucked the phone in his coat and turned to face her. His smile was there, but it didn't reach his eyes. "What happened?" Rosa asked, her voice immediately alert. James hesitated for a beat too long. "James." "There's a piece coming out," he said carefully. "A tabloid. Someone leaked photos from the gala. They're framing it like I'm using charity to rehab my image." Rosa's stomach dropped. And me, his silence told her everything. She took a step back, crossing her arms. "What does it say? I haven't seen the full article yet, just the summary. But your name is in it. So is Sophia's." The room suddenly felt colder. "I thought you said you shut this down," Rosa whispered. "I did. I filed injunctions. But tabloids don't wait for permission, Rosa. They print first. Apologize later." Her chest tightened, breath-catching. "They're dragging us into your mess again. I didn't choose this," he said, stepping closer. "But you're used to it. You know how to ride it out." "I don't have that kind of armor, James. Sophia doesn't. I can fix this." "No," she snapped, her voice trembling. "You can't fix this with a check or a statement. This isn't just a PR issue, it's our lives. My daughter's life." James stood frozen, helpless. Rosa shook her head, blinking back, the sting in her eyes. "Every time I try to trust this, something pulls me back. And I'm starting to think that's not coincidence. Maybe the universe is trying to tell me something." He stepped forward, softer now. "Don't say that. Rosa, we're building something here. Not just this place, but us. You told me to walk through the door. I did. I'm here." "And I see that," she said, voice cracking. "I do. But you came through a door that leads back to a world I'm not sure I can survive in." Silence wrapped around them, heavy and still. James finally spoke, barely above a whisper. "So what are you saying?" "I'm saying, I need space, just for a while." The words landed like stones between them. James swallowed hard, nodding slowly. "I'll give you that." She turned, forcing herself not to look back, as she stepped out into the gray December afternoon. That evening, Rosa sat at the kitchen table, the hum of the heater soft in the background. Sophia colored beside her, humming softly to herself, oblivious to the storm. On the table sat a folded piece of paper, her proposal for the nest. Everything she wanted to build, everything she believed in. And beside it, a letter from the school. A holiday thank you for Rosa's volunteer work. Inside, written in Sophia's messy handwriting, was a note that read, "I'm proud of you, Mom. You make the world better." Rosa pressed her palm over the words, her throat thick. The next day, the article hit the internet. It wasn't cruel, but it was intrusive. Her name was there printed like a label, her photo from the gala looking surprised and out of place in her second-hand dress. Sophia's age mentioned casually. James's name everywhere as if it explained everything. The comments were worse. She's just another woman trying to climb the ladder. Single moms always have an angle. Guess he's buying love now. Rosa didn't reply, didn't respond. She closed the laptop, poured herself tea, and held her silence like a shield. But that night, she didn't sleep. By morning, her decision was made. She dressed carefully, pulled her curls into a neat braid, and walked to the Bridgeway office. Not to talk to James. Not yet. But to make one thing clear. She stepped into Margaret Henley's office without knocking. Margaret looked up, surprised. "Rosa." "I want it in writing," Rosa said, voice steady. "The nest, my name, my lead, full creative control. I want it in the partnership clause." Margaret blinked. "Excuse me, you said stories are currency," Rosa said. "Well, this one's mine now. I'm not letting someone else write it." Margaret tilted her head. "You think you can handle the heat? I've been living in fire my whole life. I just never had a match of my own." There was a long silence. Then Margaret leaned back and nodded slowly. "I'll have legal draw it up." Rosa turned to leave, and Margaret called after her. "Don't let the noise bury the good. You're better than most of us." Rosa paused, then walked out. And for the first time, the air didn't feel heavy. It felt earned. It was Christmas Eve and Charleston glowed. Gas lanterns flickered outside storefronts. Wreaths curled with red ribbon swung gently in the breeze, and carolers gathered at the corner of King and Broad, their voices echoing softly against the brick buildings. The city felt like a snow globe, even without snow, caught in a still magical moment. Rosa stood inside the nest, the last light of the day pouring through the newly washed front windows. The shelves were in place. The walls painted a soft honey gold. The rug for the reading nook had arrived early, still rolled up in the corner like a promise. She ran her fingers along the counter James had helped install. She could still hear his voice as he held the level, asking if it looked straight, while pretending not to smile when she tilted her head dramatically like a designer on a reality show. Everything in here bore a piece of their shared effort, a fingerprint, a memory. And yet he hadn't called since she walked out. She had asked for space, and James had honored that. Part of her respected him more for it. Part of her hated how much she missed him because of it. She looked up at the small clock above the doorway. 6:04 p.m. She had one more delivery to make. 10 minutes later, Rosa and Sophia stood in front of an old brownstone on Colonial Street. A soft rain had started, misty and warm. Sophia clutched a box wrapped in brown paper and tied with string. Her cheeks were pink from the cold, her eyes wide with quiet excitement. "You sure he'll be home?" Sophia asked. Rosa nodded, smoothing her daughter's hair. "If not, we'll leave it by the door." She knocked twice. The door opened before she could pull her hand back. James stood there wearing an old sweater, no blazer, no armor. Just him. Eyes surprised, hopeful, tired. "Hi," Rosa said softly. "Hi." They stood there for a second too long. Sophia stepped forward and held out the box. "We made you something." James knelt to take it. "You did open it." She grinned. Inside was a framed photo taken at the nest, a candid shot of the three of them. James helping Rosa hang the wooden sign, while Sophia balanced on a step stool, pretending to hold it steady. Below it, Rosa had written, "This is what we're building." James swallowed hard, his fingers tightening around the frame. "I didn't know if you'd want to see us," Rosa said quietly. "I always want to see you," he said, his voice breaking just a little. "But I needed to give you room to decide." "I did decide," Rosa said. Not just about the bookstore, about us. But I needed to know that if we were going to do this, it was going to be real. On both sides. James looked at her like she was sunlight. I was scared, he admitted. Not of the headlines, not even of the fallout, but of messing this up. You and Sophia. You matter more than anything I've built. Rosa stepped closer. Then let's build something we don't have to fix. Not perfect, just honest. He nodded slowly, emotion flickering across his face. Come inside, he asked. She hesitated, then smiled. One condition. Name it. You make the cocoa. James laughed, the tension falling off his shoulders like a winter coat. You're getting the good kind. Inside the house smelled like cinnamon and pine. The tree in the corner glowed softly, wrapped in white lights and hand-painted ornaments. Sophia curled up on the couch with Micah, the two of them already trading jokes about who could drink more marshmallows. Rosa stood at the edge of the kitchen watching James stir milk on the stove, his brow furrowed in focus. You still do everything like it's a mission, she teased. He looked up and grinned. Only the important things. She leaned against the counter, quieter now. You know, for a long time, I thought people like me didn't get to have lives like this. James turned serious. Why? Because we were always cleaning up after other people's joy, serving tables, folding sheets, waiting until everyone else left before we could breathe. James set down the spoon. You deserve to breathe first, Rosa. She looked at him, really looked, and this time she believed it. They stood there in the quiet, the steam rising from the pot between them. Then James reached into the cabinet and pulled out 2 mugs, one red, one white. Simple. Mismatched. He handed her the red one. You always give me the good one, she said, smiling into the rim, because you always return it fuller than you found it. That night, as snow began to fall softly for the first time all winter, Rosa and James sat side by side on the couch, their children asleep, the tree blinking gently behind them. And for the first time, it didn't feel like a fairy tale. It felt like something better. It felt real. It was the morning after Christmas, and the city was quiet, wrapped in a kind of peaceful pause. The storm of celebration had passed, leaving only the soft echoes of carols, the scent of pine, and a sky that threatened a little more snow. Charleston didn't usually see much of it, but today even the wind felt different. Gentler somehow. Rosa stood inside the nest with a broom in one hand and a half-finished checklist in the other. She'd come early before Sophia woke, before James could offer to drive her before the city started moving again. There was something about the stillness that made her feel grounded, like she could hear her own heart better in the quiet. The shop looked almost ready. A few last-minute boxes to unpack, tags to sort, books to shelve. But it was more than that now. The nest wasn't just a project. It had become the container for everything she was learning to trust again, purpose, partnership, and maybe even love. She ran her hand along the spine of a children's book and smiled. You always show up before I can. James's voice came from the doorway. She turned, startled. He leaned against the frame, holding 2 coffees. I thought I'd get the drop on you this time. You'll need to set an alarm for 4 a.m., if you want that, she said, taking the cup from him. He stepped inside, shaking the snow from his coat. I had a meeting with our web designer. The landing page is up. Already Rosa raised an eyebrow. He grinned. You'll love it. Clean layout, community spotlight, and event calendar. We're even featuring a Story of the Week submission section. Kids can send in their own stories and drawings. She stared at him. You're seriously making this real? I told you. I don't do halfway. Rosa nodded, but there was something unreadable in her eyes. James caught it. What is it? She hesitated, then pulled a folded letter from her back pocket and held it out. It came last night. Hand-delivered. James took it, scanning quickly. His eyes hardened as he read. A cease and desist from a media conglomerate, a warning that the Nest's story, specifically Rosa's involvement, was being misrepresented in a growing social media thread. A thread spun by someone anonymous, but now catching viral attention. They're accusing us of exploiting poverty, he muttered. That this entire project is a PR stunt built on your struggle. Rosa's voice was calm, but firm. I told you people would try to take this from us. They won't, he said quickly, too quickly. She looked away, hugging her arms. They already are. James, this isn't about business anymore. This is personal. It's about me, about Sophia, and what happens when the narrative gets taken out of our hands. I can fight this, he said. I've got the best attorneys. We'll file a countersuit, block the publication. No. Her voice was low, sharp. We don't fight back in court. Not this time. We fight back by opening the doors. He blinked. You want to win? She continued. Let them see it with their own eyes. Let them walk through these doors and feel what this place really is. A bookstore, a safe space, not a headline. James stared at her, admiration shining through his frustration. You're not afraid anymore. I am, she said honestly. But I'm more afraid of staying small. They stood in silence, the weight of the moment settling around them. Then James stepped closer. Whatever happens next, we do it together. Rosa nodded, her voice steady. Together. Later that afternoon, Rosa posted a video on the Nest's brand new social page. No fancy graphics, no edited music. Just her sitting in the children's corner with books stacked behind her. My name is Rosa Delgado, she began. Some of you may have seen my face in places I never expected to be. Some of you have opinions about me, about this bookstore, about how it came to be. So I want to tell you the truth. Not with headlines, not through gossip, but here from where it started. She paused, took a breath. This place was born out of necessity, out of a single mother who wanted more for her daughter, out of a man who offered help not with pity but with partnership. It was built by volunteers, neighbors, retired teachers, kids with paintbrushes, and yes, by hope, real stubborn hope. The comments began flowing in almost immediately. Supportive, curious, emotional. James watched from across the room, pride growing in his chest. You did it, he whispered, as Rosa clicked, post. No, she said, looking up at him. We did. And for the first time in her life, Rosa felt like she wasn't just surviving someone else's world. She was building her own. 2 days after Rosa's video went live, the world around. The Nest shifted, not in an explosion, not in a flood of overnight fame, but in small, steady, undeniable ways. The front window began collecting post-it notes, kind ones, encouraging ones, a child's drawing of a heart, a woman's scrawled line. You're what this city needed. By Thursday morning, Rosa arrived to find a line of volunteers waiting outside, a high school literature club, 2 retired librarians, even a former contractor who offered to install a wheelchair ramp for free. The message was spreading, not the one spun by tabloids or edited by strangers, but her message, the one born from truth and carried by people who believed in it. Still, the attention brought pressure. James noticed it in the way Rosa hesitated before opening her email now, in the way her phone buzzed more often than it used to, in the look in her eyes when someone said influencer like it was a curse or a crown. She was standing under a new spotlight, and it burned hot. That afternoon, Rosa stepped outside for air. The winter breeze hit her cheeks, sharp and grounding. She leaned against the brick wall, eyes closed. A voice broke her stillness. You're getting good at breathing through the chaos. She opened her eyes. James stood a few feet away, hands in his coat pockets, watching her with that careful, unreadable look he only gave when something deeper was stirring. "I had a good teacher," she said softly. He moved closer. "You've outgrown me." She gave him a tired smile. "Not possible." There was a pause. Then James cleared his throat. "There's something I didn't tell you." Rosa looked up. He shifted. "My father reached out. That stopped her cold." She stared. After all this time, James nodded. He saw the video, the article, everything. Said it was bold and reckless, and he wants to meet. Rosa folded her arms. Why now he claims he's proud, that he wants to understand the new direction I've taken. James's voice turned dry. His words, not mine. "Do you believe him?" James looked away, jaw tight. "I don't know. Part of me thinks he just wants to get close enough to dismantle it, to remind me of what I left behind." Rosa stepped forward, gentler now. "What do you want?" He met her eyes. "I want to protect what we've built. But I also want him to see it. To see you. Sophia. The nest. Not because I owe him anything, but because he doesn't get to pretend I'm still his version of success." Her breath hitched slightly. "You want me to meet him?" James hesitated. "Only if you want to. I won't ask you to walk into something uncomfortable. I don't want to face him alone." Rosa thought for a long moment. Then she reached for his hand. "You won't have to." They met James's father the following evening at the Charleston Place Hotel, where opulence met tradition, where old money sipped neat scotch and smiled without showing teeth. Rosa wore a navy dress she borrowed from a friend. Simple, elegant, honest. James wore no tie. His father, Robert Caldwell, stood when they approached. He was tall, sharp in every way. Salt gray hair, silver cufflinks, and eyes that assessed Rosa with the precision of a man who had built empires on split-second judgments. "So you're the woman shaking my son's foundation," he said, offering a hand. Rosa took it. Not shaking. Building something new. James gave her the smallest nod. She was already holding her ground. Robert gestured for them to sit. "I watched your video. Well delivered. Authentic. Emotional. You've got the public on your side." Rosa tilted her head. "It wasn't meant for the public. It was for the people I serve. Same thing these days," Robert said with a thin smile. James leaned forward. "This isn't a PR stunt, Dad." "No," Robert agreed, "but it's smart. Aligning yourself with someone from a different world. A story people want to root for. But be careful. They love to cheer on a rise until they remember who's paying for the view." Rosa's expression stayed even. "I've never asked James for a view. Just a chance to build one of my own?" For the first time, Robert looked intrigued. "Do you love him?" he asked. James tensed beside her, but Rosa didn't flinch. "Yes, but not because of what he's done for me, because of who he's allowed himself to become beside me." Silence sat between them like a held breath. Finally, Robert leaned back, folding his hands. "I see. You don't have to approve." James said, his voice calm but firm. "Just understand this is my life now. And I won't step backward." Robert gave the faintest nod. "Then I suppose I owe you a different kind of respect." He stood, buttoned his coat, and looked between them. "I don't believe in fairy tales," he said. "But if this turns out to be one, make sure it lasts past midnight." With that, he left. Outside the hotel, Rosa exhaled, long and slow. James turned to her, stunned. "You just went toe-to-toe with one of the most strategic minds in this city." She looked at him. "I wasn't strategizing. I was telling the truth." He smiled, eyes full of something rare and grateful. "I love you for that." And as the lights of the city sparkled behind them, Rosa finally believed it wasn't just the bookstore that was built to last. It was them. The soft chime of the front doorbell echoed as the first customer stepped into the nest that morning. It was opening day, officially. A new year had dawned, and with it came a kind of breath Rosa hadn't felt in a long time, clean, deep, and hers. The bookstore was glowing. Sunlight spilled through the windows, casting golden light across the hardwood floors. Shelves lined the walls, filled not just with books, but stories that had already lived donated copies from neighbors, annotated with little sticky notes, dog-eared pages love. There were bean bags in the children's corner, a community board near the register, and a table up front stacked with journals and blank notebooks, an invitation to write. It smelled like cinnamon and paper and fresh paint. But more than that, it felt sacred. Rosa stood behind the counter with Sophia by her side, both of them wearing simple name tags. Hers said, Founder, Sophia's official story expert. James hadn't arrived yet, or so she thought. Then he walked in quietly through the back, holding 2 cups of cocoa instead of coffee. You remember she smiled, accepting one. Hard to forget the thing that started it all, he said. They leaned in close for a moment. No words, just that quiet hum between people who'd been through a storm and still chose to stay. Today's the first page, he murmured. Rosa looked around, eyes damp. We earned it. The bell chimed again. Customers began trickling in, a few curious strangers, more than a handful of friends, children with parents, teachers, locals, a food truck parked outside offering free coffee and pastries donated by a small business James had once invested in quietly. The place buzzed with soft voices and slow discovery. People opened books and sat without being asked. The rhythm of it all was soft, steady, perfect. Mid-morning, Margaret Henley arrived in a crimson coat, sharp as ever. She greeted Rosa with a look that almost passed for pride. You made it, Rosa said. Margaret gave a small smirk. I don't show up for grand openings, but I show up for impact. She handed Rosa a sealed envelope. Rosa blinked. What's this, a letter of recommendation? For a city arts grant. I figured you might want to expand someday, maybe add a literacy program. This place is more than a shop. It's a seed. Rosa swallowed hard. Thank you. Margaret gave her a look. You didn't need my help, but I'm glad you let me offer it. By early afternoon, the nest was full. Micah and Sophia were reading aloud to a group of kids near the back, their voices rising and falling with a fairy tale. James sat on the edge, watching them, a rare softness on his face. Rosa moved through the space, slowly checking in, straightening books, answering questions. She didn't need a mic or a podium. Her presence filled the room naturally. And then, it happened. An older woman approached the counter. She wore a green scarf, hands weathered from years of work, eyes wide with wonder. I saw your story online, she said. Watched your video. 3 times. Rosa smiled gently. Thank you. I haven't been in a bookstore in 20 years, the woman said, voice trembling. I raised 4 boys alone, worked double shifts. I used to read to them in laundromats and waiting rooms. I thought, maybe I'd lost that part of myself. Rosa's hand found hers across the counter. You didn't lose it, she said. You just waited until it had a home to return to. The woman nodded, tears welling. That moment, quiet, unfiltered, was what the whole story had been building toward. Not a headline, not a romance, not even redemption, just connection. Later, as the sky turned amber and the last guest trickled out, Rosa stood near the door with James beside her. They watched Sophia and Micah pack up books and sweep gently, quietly, chatting. Did I ever tell you, Rosa began, I used to think the best I could hope for was being invisible. James looked at her full of something unshakable. Now the whole city sees you, he said. But more than that, You see yourself." She looked at him, heart swelling. "Do you ever worry," she asked softly, "that this is too good? That it's not supposed to last?" James paused. Then he took her hand and walked her outside into the cool twilight air. He pointed toward the streetlight where two birds had built a nest up high between wires and steel and wind. "They build where they can," he said. "Even when it doesn't make sense. Even when the world shakes. They build anyway." Rosa looked up at the little tangle of twigs and feathers. "You're saying if it's fragile, it doesn't mean it's doomed. I'm saying, if we keep showing up, if we stay steady, we make it strong." She nodded slowly, leaning her head on his shoulder. Inside, Sophia turned off the lights one by one, humming to herself. And outside, under the falling dark, with cocoa in their hands and warmth between them, James and Rosa stood together at the edge of everything they'd built. Not a fairy tale, not a rescue, but something better. A life. Made piece by piece in love and in light. And in every chapter still to come. Calvin Rhodes stood at the floor-to-ceiling window of his luxury penthouse suite, hands in his pocket, shoulders tight, watching the tide slide back from the Savannah shoreline. The sky was a soft gold. A breeze swayed the moss in the oaks far below, but none of it reached him. He had everything most people would call a dream. But inside there was only the echo. The hotel was 5-star, of course. He could have bought the building without checking his balance. But the coffee was too bitter, the quiet too loud. For a man who once built one of the most successful software companies on the West Coast, he now spent most mornings staring at silence like it was trying to say something. His phone buzzed. Tanya, his longtime assistant, had sent another schedule reminder keynote at Savannah Civic Center 2 p.m., panel Q&A to follow. Flight back to Austin tomorrow, 10 a.m. He stared at it, then locked the screen without replying. He hadn't booked a return flight yet. A knock at the suite door interrupted the quiet. Room service. Calvin barely glanced at the waiter as the man wheeled in the breakfast tray. He muttered thanks, waited for the door to close, then sat at the edge of the leather sofa and stirred his coffee with a silver spoon that didn't match the cup. 2 poached eggs, toast, half a grapefruit. Everything as requested. And yet, he didn't touch any of it. Instead, he reached for a smaller item on the tray. A local brochure tucked under the napkin, hand-picked by the concierge. Hidden Gems of Savannah. His eyes landed on one image. A white-columned house draped in ivy nestled under the shadows of live oaks. A small handwritten caption, Caldwell House Inn, award-winning Southern Charm family owned. His fingers stopped. Just for a moment. Calvin exhaled through his nose, barely audible, but it cut through the stillness. That house. It hadn't changed. Not from what he remembered. Not from that last photograph Renee had mailed him years ago before silence stretched into distance, and distance into something that looked like absence. He looked down at the brochure again, this time, slower. A whisper in his mind. Just see it. He stood. By noon, his driver was maneuvering slowly through a cobbled side street in Savannah's historic district. Azaleas spilled over gates. Ivy hugged weather-worn brick. The past wasn't just preserved here. It pulsed under every window shutter, every creaking porch step. The kind of place where people knew who they were. Or at least tried to. "Sure you don't want me to wait, sir?" the driver asked, glancing through the rearview mirror. "No, this won't take long." Calvin stepped out of the car, his shoes crunching softly on gravel. The house rose before him, like something from memory, not reality. White-painted wood trimmed with black shutters. A porch swing. A half-finished wreath on the door. It smelled like magnolia and cut grass and something else. Something older. He paused at the gate, then took a breath and walked up the stone path. Just before he could knock, the door creaked open. A little girl stood there. She was maybe 7. Curly dark hair pulled half back with a green ribbon. Freckles dusted across her nose. She wore a blue dress and clutched a coloring book in one hand. "Hi," she said, blinking up at him. "Are you Mr. Calvin?" The world tilted slightly. Her voice had a softness that felt familiar in a way he couldn't place. He crouched down slowly, not quite knowing why. "I am." "And you are Isla," she said. "You look like someone in my picture." She held up the coloring book. A child's drawing. 3 stick figures. One was labeled, "Mommy won me," and the third... Grandpa Calvin's throat tightened. He didn't know what to say. "I drew it for school," she explained as if sensing his confusion. "My teacher said to draw family. Mommy said Grandpa lives far away, but Grandma said you'd visit one day." Before he could answer, a voice rang out from inside. "Isla, honey, who's at the door?" The sound hit him harder than expected. He hadn't heard it in nearly a decade, but it was still clear, steady, warm with warning underneath. Then she appeared. Marianne. She stepped into view from the hallway, holding a dish towel, eyes scanning the doorway. She wore jeans and a soft blue shirt, her hair pulled back, loosely, smile halfway to forming until she saw him. Her hands froze. The towel slipped from her fingers to the floor. "Calvin," she said quietly. He stood straighter. "Hello, Marianne." The space between them filled with everything unsaid. 8 years of silence. 8 years of choices. "I didn't expect you," she said, finally. "I know." She glanced at Isla, then back at him. What are you doing here?" He hesitated. "I had a conference. I saw the inn's name. Thought I'd stop by, just to see." Her jaw tensed, but her voice stayed calm. "This isn't a drop-in kind of place anymore. I can see that." Isla looked between them. "Grandma, is this my real grandpa?" Marianne closed her eyes briefly. The question hovered in the humid air like a sudden storm. Calvin said nothing. He looked at Isla again. Those eyes. That smile. The girl tilted her head. "Do you want to come in?" A long pause. Then Marianne exhaled slowly. "You can stay. One night. The Magnolia Room is open." He nodded. "Thank you." As he stepped inside, his fingers brushed the edge of the doorframe. He remembered painting it with her. Before the company sold, before the jet-set years, before he forgot the feel of this place. Inside, everything smelled like lemon oil and old books. Photographs lined the hallway wall, none of them included him. Yet the house felt like him, like a life that might have been his if he hadn't gone looking for everything else. Delia, the inn assistant, appeared at the corner, noticed him, and quickly turned away. Marianne pointed down the hall without looking at him. "Last room on the right." He walked toward it. Isla trailed behind him a few steps before running back to the kitchen. Inside the room, sunlight poured through sheer curtains. The bed was made with hand-stitched quilts. A ceramic pitcher sat by the window, a small bookshelf with titles he recognized from years ago. One still had his handwriting inside the cover. He sat down. Not because he was tired, because he didn't know what else to do. He'd come looking for a place. What he found was a little girl who drew him before she knew him, and a woman who still looked at him like a question she'd already answered. And yet he couldn't shake the feeling something had just started. If you enjoyed this video, comment 1. To let me know, if not, comment 2. Your thought mattered to me either way. The Magnolia Room smelled faintly of lavender and old cedar. Calvin sat in the corner armchair, elbows on his knees, Fingers laced his suitcase untouched near the door. Outside the window, a wind chime whispered with each lazy gust, its delicate notes dancing against the hush inside. He hadn't moved in nearly 10 minutes. Down the hall he heard Isla's voice bubbling in and out of earshot, bright full of questions like childhood had no idea how heavy the world could be. He closed his eyes. There was a time, not long after the divorce, when silence like this would have felt like victory. No meetings, no schedules, no one expecting anything from him but success. Now it felt like failure with better furniture. A knock came soft but firm. He stood adjusting his shirt collar as Marianne stepped into view. She didn't enter, just leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed loosely. "I forgot we had this room painted last fall," she said. "You're lucky. The other guest room's water heater acts up." He nodded, trying to read her. Her posture was calm, but her eyes, those hadn't changed. Clear, observant, the color of iced tea in sunlight. They always saw more than he wanted to say. "I didn't come to stir anything up," he said. "Then you shouldn't have come at all." The reply wasn't cruel. It was matter-of-fact, like a line in a ledger. He breathed in. "I didn't plan this. I saw the inn in a brochure. The name. I just needed to see." She tilted her head slightly. "To see what exactly?" He hesitated. Then quietly, "If it was still here. If you were still here." That caught something in her expression. It flickered and was gone just as quickly. "Well, it is. And I am. But that doesn't mean anything else is. I'm not expecting anything." "Good," she said, turning to leave, then paused. "Because expecting was what broke us." The words hung between them, sharp in their softness. She walked back toward the kitchen. Calvin followed a few steps before stopping in the hallway. The walls were lined with framed photos, some familiar, some not. He stopped at one. It was a shot of Renee, maybe a few years ago, standing under the massive oak tree in the backyard, arms around a child in a sun hat. Her face was turned slightly, but the girl's face, Isla's, was visible, laughing. And unmistakably his. He touched the frame lightly, then pulled his hand back. In the kitchen, Marianne stirred something on the stove. The air smelled like onions and thyme. Delia bustled nearby, humming to herself, throwing a knowing glance at him, before pretending not to notice he'd entered. "Dinner's not for a while," Marianne said without turning around. "I wasn't," he caught himself. "I just wanted to say, the place looks beautiful." "You've done well," Marianne finally looked over. "It took work." "I imagine." She wiped her hands on a towel. "You imagine, I know it couldn't have been easy. Running a place like this alone?" "I wasn't alone." His chest tightened. "Right. Of course." Delia cut in gently, pulling cornbread from the oven. "You staying long, Mr. Rhodes? I haven't decided yet. Well, we've got guests all weekend. Spring tour season. Rooms will be full. I won't be in the way." Marianne said nothing, just stirred the pot again. Calvin looked toward the back door, where Isla had wandered outside with a sketchbook and a small box of crayons. "She's bright," he said. "She is," Marianne replied. "And she doesn't need confusion in her life." He looked back at her. "Is she, Calvin?" Her voice was quiet but firm. "Don't. Not yet." There was a pause. "I just need to know if I said not yet." Her tone wasn't angry, but it left no room. He stepped back. Outside, Ela had sat on the porch swing and was drawing something intently. A sun, a tree, maybe the inn itself. Her brow furrowed like she was solving an equation, not doodling. Calvin watched her for a while through the screen door. "She reminds me of Renee," he said softly. Marianne didn't answer. He glanced over and found her watching him, spoon still in hand. "I missed so much," he said. "You did?" I thought. At the time it made sense, to stay out, to give space. "You thought space meant silence?" she replied. It didn't. It meant abandonment. Her words landed deliberate and true. He looked down. "I thought you hated me." "I did," she said. "For a while. Then I stopped. Hate takes too much energy. I needed that energy to raise our daughter." Calvin leaned against the counter. "Does Renee live nearby?" Marianne nodded. "About 10 minutes away. She works part-time at the library. Isla stays here some nights. Why didn't anyone tell me? Tell you what that life went on?" He swallowed. "That I had a grandchild." Marianne turned, gently lowered the heat on the stove. "Because for a long time I didn't know how to contact you. And when I did, I wasn't sure I should." "I would have come," he said. She looked at him. "Would you?" The silence between them answered. Delia quietly excused herself. The back screen door squeaked as Isla came in with her drawing held high. "Grandma, look. I drew the porch." Marianne crouched down and admired it. "It's perfect, sweetheart. Go put it on the fridge." Isla turned to Calvin. "Do you want to see where the big tree is? The one with the rope swing? I'd love to." Marianne looked up at him, uncertain. "I'll be careful," he said, reading her face. Isla grabbed his hand before anyone could stop her. Her grip was small, warm, trusting. He let her lead him outside. The backyard opened into a soft patch of green shaded by a sprawling oak. Wind rustled the leaves. The swing creaked gently from a branch overhead. "This is where I sit when I'm sad," Isla said suddenly. Calvin glanced down. "Are you sad often?" "Not a lot. Just when I miss my daddy." He blinked. "Your daddy?" She nodded, still looking at the swing. "He died before I was born. Mommy said he was kind and smart. I think he sent me drawings in my dreams sometimes." He swallowed hard. "I bet he did." She turned, tilting her head. "Were you ever sad, more than I used to admit?" She studied him. "You look like Mommy?" "Kinda. But older." He smiled softly. "I guess I do." Isla reached up and took his hand again. Inside the house, Marianne stood at the window watching them. Her lips pressed into a line. Not anger, not fear. Something closer to something she'd sworn she wouldn't feel again. Hope, and the ache that always came with it. Calvin sat at the edge of the bed in the magnolia room that night, staring at his reflection in the tall antique mirror across from him. The soft creak of the old house settling beneath him, the distant sound of crickets and the hum of the ceiling fan above were the only things filling the room. The kind of quiet that doesn't soothe it, exposes. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, face in his hands. The backyard swing. Isla's words. Her grip on his hand. "Were you ever sad?" That question echoed louder now than when she asked it. He didn't know what to call what he felt. Regret, guilt, a strange, unbearable longing to rewind time, not for success, not for the money, not even for the marriage, but for the moments he didn't know he'd miss. A knock broke the silence. He stood and opened the door. Delia stood there with a folded blanket in her arms. "Extra cover," she said lightly, then held it out. "Chilly nights sneak up on you around here." "Thanks," he said, surprised. She didn't leave right away. Her eyes studied him for a beat. "She's not the same person you left," Delia said. "Neither are you, I guess. But don't come in here thinking a few kind words and a sad smile will fix 8 years." He nodded slowly. "I'm not trying to fix anything." "That's good," she said. "Because if you were, you'd already be doing it wrong." Then just like that, She walked away, soft footsteps disappearing down the hall. Calvin folded the blanket over the chair and looked back at the mirror. This time he didn't see a billionaire or a father or even a man trying to right a wrong. He saw someone trying to find the courage to stay still. The next morning brought soft sun filtering through lace curtains and the smell of coffee drifting from the kitchen. Calvin dressed in a light blue button-down, rolled the sleeves, and made his way down the hall. He found Marianne in the kitchen with a steaming mug in her hands, flipping through a notebook and tapping a pen against her lip. "Morning," he said. She looked up. "Sleep okay? Better than I deserved." A beat passed. "There's fresh coffee," she offered. He poured himself a cup and leaned against the counter, watching her. "You always made the best coffee," he said. "Even when we had that tiny apartment in Portland. You used to grind the beans by hand just to prove you could." She smiled faintly, but didn't look at him. "You used to say it made the whole place smell like ambition." He chuckled softly. "I did." They stood in the shared quiet, sipping from mismatched mugs, the memory between them softer now, like worn fabric. The front door creaked. A tall man with silver-streaked hair stepped inside, carrying a set of tools in one hand and a half bag of bagels in the other. Back door locks sticking again, he called out, "Figured I'd fix it before the lunch crowd rolls in." Marianne smiled warmly. "You're a lifesaver, Walter." Calvin turned. Walter's eyes landed on him. He paused, a brief moment of recognition, or maybe assessment, passing between them. "Well," Walter said, setting the bag on the table. "Didn't know you had company?" "Walter, this is Calvin," Marianne said calmly. "Calvin, this is Walter Griggs." Calvin extended a hand. "Nice to meet you." Walter took it firm shake. "Same." The air shifted. Calvin noticed the easy way Walter moved in the kitchen, the way he knew where the mugs were without asking, how Marianne smiled when he pulled a chair out like it was routine. He knew instantly that Walter wasn't just the handyman. And something about that realization settled like a stone in Calvin's chest. Walter glanced at Marianne. "Got a new drill bit in the truck. Be right back." Once he was out of earshot, Calvin said, "He seems close." Marianne raised a brow. "He's been around. For how long?" She gave him a look. "You don't get to ask that?" He nodded. "Fair." She set her coffee down. "Walter's been a friend, someone who shows up, helps without being asked, doesn't disappear for years and expect to be welcomed back like nothing happened." Calvin took that in. "I'm not expecting to be welcomed." "Then what are you expecting, Calvin?" Her voice was low but firm, colored with weariness. Closure, forgiveness. "A reunion." "I don't know," he admitted. "I didn't plan this. I didn't even know Isla existed until yesterday." She looked at him for a long moment. "I didn't hide her," she said softly. "But I didn't reach out either. You left so clean, so final. I figured you wanted it that way. I thought I was giving you space." Marianne laughed once quietly, but it wasn't joy. "You gave me silence, Calvin. That's not the same thing." The screen door slammed as Walter returned. The conversation broke, left unfinished. Walter nodded toward the back. "Should only take me 15 minutes. I'll be on the porch," Marianne said, grabbing her mug and stepping outside. Calvin watched her go, then turned to Walter. "She's doing well," he said. Walter glanced up from his toolbox. "She is." "You helped her through all that?" Walter shrugged. "She helped herself. I just made sure she had what she needed to keep going." Calvin looked down. "That's something I should have done." Walter paused. His work looked up. "Then maybe now's your chance." They stood in a quiet understanding that had no need for more words. That afternoon, Calvin wandered the property. He walked the length of the wraparound porch through the garden that bloomed wild and sweet. He found himself near the side of the house where a stack of empty flower pots leaned against the wall, and a small chalkboard sign rested on a nail, "Welcome to Caldwell House." He leaned against the railing and watched the sunlight flicker through the trees. He stayed there until Isla came bounding out the front door with a popsicle in one hand and her sketchbook in the other. "Grandpa," she shouted, her voice ringing clear and bright. It hit him harder than he expected. He bent down as she ran up and wrapped her arms around his leg. "I saved the red one for you," she said, holding up the popsicle like it was treasure. He crouched beside her and took it heart tight in his chest. "Thank you," he said, at voice a little rough. She grinned. "Grandma said you're staying another night." "I think I might stay a bit longer," he said. She beamed. From the window, Marianne watched them again, her face unreadable. But something had shifted. Maybe not trust, not yet. But maybe permission to begin. If you enjoyed this video, comment 1 to let me know. If not, comment 2. Your thought mattered to me either way. The photo sat framed on the hallway table just beneath the staircase. It wasn't large, 4x6 at most, but something about it caught Calvin's eye every time he passed. He paused there now, mid-morning light, slanting across the hardwood floor, coffee in hand, gaze fixed. 3 people in the frame. Renee stood to the left, arms folded, soft smile. Isla in the middle held a small bouquet of wildflowers, head thrown back in laughter. To the right, no one. Just empty space, like someone was supposed to be there. Calvin leaned closer. The background was a familiar one, Forsyth Park. The oak trees, the old fountain, the garden beds, all in bloom. The emptiness in the composition wasn't accidental. Marianne took that one. Delia's voice came from behind him, gentle but pointed. Said it was the most honest picture she ever snapped. Calvin turned. Because of what's not there. Delia nodded. Sometimes absence frames the truth clearer than presence ever could. He looked at the photo again. "Renee doesn't know I'm here, does she?" "She does now," Delia said. Marianne told her last night. Said she should decide for herself what to do with the information. Calvin felt the knot in his stomach tighten. "Isla doesn't know yet," Delia added. "Not the whole picture. She just sees a kind man who likes her drawings and listens when she talks about butterflies." He smiled softly, then looked away. Delia hesitated. "You know, Marianne used to talk about you like you were a fixed star. Like even if you were far, your presence still guided everything. But stars don't answer letters. They don't show up to birthdays." Her words landed without cruelty, but they didn't need it. "I'm not trying to undo the past," Calvin said. "No, but you're here now," she replied. "So you better figure out what that actually means." She walked away, leaving him with his coffee and the silence. Later that day, Calvin wandered out to the back porch. Isla sat cross-legged on the step, sketchbook open tongue between her teeth in concentration. She didn't look up when he approached. "Busy at work, I see." "Drawing Grandma's garden," she said. "But I can't get the lavender right. It looks like a bunch of weird purple ants." He sat beside her, chuckling. "Let me see." She flipped the book around. He studied the drawing. "I think it looks beautiful. You're just saying that." "I don't lie about art." She grinned. "Do you draw?" "I used to. A long time ago. Why'd you stop?" He thought about that. "I got busy with things that felt important at the time, but I think maybe they weren't." She nodded like she understood more than she should. Inside, a door closed. Calvin looked up. Renee stood at the screen, arms crossed, face unreadable. His breath caught. She hadn't changed much, Older, yes. Wiser. But her posture, that quiet strength, still reminded him of Marianne. Only sharper. Like a woman who learned not to wait for people to come through. He stood slowly. Isla looked between them. Mommy Renee managed a smile and stepped outside. "Hey, sweetheart. Look what Grandpa helped me with?" Calvin flinched at the word. Renee's gaze flicked to him, then back to Isla. "Why don't you go show Grandma I'll be right in?" Isla skipped off, sketchbook in hand. Now it was just the two of them. Renee's arms remained crossed. Her voice when she spoke was low and even. "I didn't think I'd see you here." "I didn't expect to be here," Calvin replied. "But I'm glad I am." "Glad," he nodded. "I met her, Isla. She's incredible." "She is." Renee agreed. "She deserves consistency, not confusion." "I'm not here to take anything," he said quickly. "I just want to understand." She studied him. "Understand what? Why no one told me. Why she looks like me. Why I see myself in the curve of her smile." Renee's jaw tightened. "There's a reason," she said. He waited. "I wanted a child. After Mark passed, I thought I'd missed my window. I used a donor program. It was legal, ethical, all above board." His stomach turned. "What donor program?" She paused. "Caltech Medical. You donated years ago. Before the IPO, before everything. You never withdrew consent. I found you on the donor list by accident. But when I saw the profile, I knew." Calvin's breath caught. "You chose me." "No," she said firmly. "I chose a man who used to be you, who wrote in his donor profile that he believed in compassion and creativity and second chances. I didn't do it to hurt you. I did it because I needed to believe those things still meant something." He was speechless. "She doesn't know," Renee continued. "Not yet. She just knows she's loved. I don't want that shaken by a man who disappears when it gets uncomfortable." "I'm not that man anymore," Calvin said quietly. She looked at him. Really looked. "I guess we'll see." She turned and walked back inside. He stood on the porch alone, the air thick with jasmine and something heavier. That night the inn was quiet. Guests chatted softly in the dining room. The lamps cast warm pools of light across the old floorboards. Marianne was clearing dessert plates when Calvin approached. She glanced up. "You and Renee talked." He nodded. She studied his face. How bad was it? It wasn't easy. She gave a small, tired smile. "It rarely is. Isla's mine." Marianne didn't react. She just set down a plate and wiped her hands. "I figured." "You did. She was born with your eyes, Calvin." I didn't need a test. They stood there in the hush of the hallway. "I want to be in her life," he said. "I know. Will you let me?" Marianne met his eyes. "That's not my call anymore." The quiet stretched between them. Then, just as he turned to leave, she spoke again. "But I'll tell you this. If you walk away now, it'll break something you won't get another chance to fix." He didn't move. "And if you stay," she added, "then stay. All in. No half measures." He nodded slowly. "I'm not going anywhere." From behind her, a light flickered in the entryway. The photo on the table caught the glow. And this time Calvin didn't see the empty space in the frame. He saw where he needed to be. Morning light spilled into the magnolia room like a soft apology. Calvin stood by the window sipping coffee from a ceramic mug with a chip in the rim. He didn't mind. Something about the imperfection made it feel honest earned. The backyard buzzed with life. Bees danced between flower beds, and Isla's laughter drifted from somewhere near the garden shed. He caught a glimpse of her skipping rope, while Delia cheered her on from a chair beneath the oak. It should have felt like peace. But peace didn't come with this kind of weight in his chest. He turned as a gentle knock tapped on the open doorframe. Marianne stood there in a loose blouse and jeans holding a folder. "We've got a wedding tour coming by this afternoon," she said. "I'll need the Magnolia room cleared by noon." "Of course," he nodded. "I'll switch to the garden room, if that's all right." She gave a small shrug. "If you're staying, stay where you're comfortable." He set his mug down. "I'll get out of the way." She lingered a moment. "You always did that. What disappear when things got messy?" He opened his mouth to respond, but she held up a hand. "This isn't blame. It's just memory." He nodded slowly. "I know." She stepped inside just a few feet and placed the folder on the edge of the dresser. "Guest invoices, maintenance logs, wedding deposit schedule," she said, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. "This is what I do now." He looked at the papers, then back at her. "You run it well." "I built it from scratch," she said softly, "with a 7-year-old and a mortgage hanging over my head. There were nights I cried in the kitchen with Isla asleep upstairs. But this place, it gave me something to hold on to." Calvin swallowed. "I should have been there." Marianne's eyes didn't harden. They didn't soften either. They just stayed steady. "I didn't need saving," she said. "I needed someone who didn't leave." The room felt smaller suddenly, too full of things unspoken for too long. "I want to help," he said, stepping forward. "Not just money. I want to earn back whatever pieces I can." Marianne studied him. "You can't rewrite the past," she said. "But maybe you can learn to live in the present without treating it like a transaction. I'm trying. I see that." Her voice lowered. "But you're not the only one who gets a say in how this goes." The back door slammed. They both turned towards the hallway. Renee's voice echoed faintly, clipped tight. "You could have told me you were moving in." Calvin sighed, stepping out of the room. Renee stood in the hallway, arms folded, keys still dangling in one hand. She looked from her mother to Calvin and back again. "I didn't move in," he said gently. "I'm here because I need to be." Need or want, Renee's tone was sharp. Marianne placed a hand on her daughter's arm. "Renee, he's not here to cause trouble." Renee's eyes glistened. "Mom, he is the trouble." "Please," Calvin said, stepping forward. "Just talk to me. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm just asking for a chance to understand you." She hesitated. "You don't get to understand me now. You don't get to come into my daughter's life and play the hero. I'm not trying to be the hero," he said. "I'm trying to be present. That's the part you never learned," she snapped. "Presence isn't about showing up once. It's about staying." He didn't speak. He couldn't. Every word felt like it might tip the scale the wrong way. Marianne's voice broke the silence. "Why don't you both take a walk?" They looked at her. "You've danced around each other enough," she said. "There's a path out back that leads to the old dock." "Take it." Renee raised an eyebrow. "You're sending us off like kids in time out? I'm giving you both the space to figure out what you need to say." A long silence followed. Then Renee turned. "Fine." She walked ahead, not waiting. Calvin followed. They stepped into the garden, then past the vegetable patch through the gate that opened into a thin trail shaded by pines and tangled branches. Spanish moss hung like old ghosts, swaying as they walked. Neither of them spoke for the first few minutes. Then Renee broke the silence. "You know what I remember about you?" Calvin looked over. "I remember a Christmas when I was 10. You brought me a robot kit. It lit up and made noises. I was so excited I built the whole thing in a day." He smiled slightly. "You always were quick. But what I remember most," she said, "was that you left the next morning. Business emergency. Something about a software breach in Berlin." His smile faded. I waited by the window the next day, thinking maybe you'd come back for dinner. I'm sorry, he whispered. She didn't acknowledge it. Just kept walking. The older I got, the less I waited. Until one day I just stopped hoping. I thought giving space meant being respectful, he said. I thought I was doing what was best. Renee stopped. They stood at the edge of the path now. The dock stretched out over a narrow creek water, dark and calm beneath it. She turned to him. Don't you get it? You don't get to define what was best. That was my life, too. He looked at her. I know that now. I'm not here because I want some grand reunion, she said. I'm here because Isla deserves clarity, and because Mom said you were trying. I am, he said. Then keep trying, she said softer this time. But understand this being part of her life won't be convenient. There are ballet recitals and skinned knees and stories at bedtime. You don't just get the good days. I want them all, he said. She studied him, eyes narrowed, like she was still trying to see if the man in front of her matched the one from her memories. Then start with today. She turned back toward the inn. Calvin followed. As they neared the house, Isla's voice rang out. Grandpa, you're back, he smiled. For the first time in years, he felt like the ground beneath his feet wasn't just a place he passed through. It might actually be somewhere he belonged. The sky was slipping into that golden shade between late afternoon and early evening when the sun cast long amber shadows across the porch. Calvin sat on the top step, Isla curled beside him with her knees tucked in and a juice box in her hand. He'd just finished reading her a story from a picture book. She picked out one about a bear who couldn't sleep without hearing the voice of someone he loved. Grandpa Isla asked her voice, light but thoughtful, when you were little who read you stories. He hesitated. My mom. Sometimes my dad. But not often. Did they have to work a lot too? He looked at her, surprised by the gentle understanding in her tone. Yes, he said. They did, and sometimes I think they didn't know how to stop working. She nodded, like that made perfect sense. Sometimes grown-ups forget to rest. Mommy says that's how you lose your kindness. He smiled at that. Your mommy is a wise woman. Just then the screen door opened. Marianne stepped out, brushing flour from her hands onto a dish towel. She paused when she saw them. Calvin sitting beside Isla, not performing, not making promises. Just being. Ilsa, sweetheart. She said dinner's in about an hour. Go wash up, okay? Okay. Isla popped up and skipped past them, waving her empty juice box like a trophy. Bye, Grandpa. Calvin watched her disappear inside before glancing up at Marianne. She's got your heart, you know. Marianne tilted her head. She has more of mine than I ever gave away. He stood slowly. Can I help with anything in the kitchen? Her expression flickered with amusement, cautious but curious. You can peel carrots, if you remember how. I can relearn. Inside the kitchen was warm, with the scent of garlic thyme, and something faintly sweet, maybe roasted apples. He took his place at the counter beside her sleeves, rolled up hands, uncertain at first with the vegetable peeler. She handed him a bowl. Don't peel them straight onto the counter. We've got standards. He chuckled. Right. Sorry. I've been in boardrooms for so long I forgot how to act in a real kitchen. You were never great in the kitchen, she said, not unkindly. I was good at ordering takeout, and good at disappearing before the dishes. They shared a glance. This one lingered. For a moment, neither said anything. The only sound was the scrape of the peeler, the soft clink of cutlery, and the slow simmer of the pot on the stove. Then she spoke softer. You've changed. I had to. Why now? He set down a carrot leaned on the counter. I thought success would quiet the noise. Fill the holes. But it didn't. I kept building more and more around me, homes, businesses, distance, and I didn't realize I'd built myself into a place no one could reach. Marianne looked down. I used to wonder what you were thinking all those years. I was thinking he said that if I stayed gone long enough, I wouldn't have to face what I lost. Her eyes lifted to his. And now I just want to be worthy of the pieces that are left. The silence after that was full, but not heavy. The front bell jingled faintly, another guest arriving. Delia's voice carried softly from the front room. Welcome to Caldwell House? You're right on time? Calvin glanced toward the sound. This place. It's more than an inn. Marianne's mouth curved. It's a second chance hidden in plain sight. He looked at her. Like you. That stopped her. Before she could answer, the back door opened and Walter stepped in, wiping his hands with a rag. Afternoon, he said. That loose shutter upstairs is fixed. And I tightened the porch rail. Thank you, Walter, Marianne said with a smile. You're a lifesaver. Walter's eyes fell on Calvin. You settling in? He asked, tone neutral. Trying, Calvin said. Walter nodded slowly, then looked to Marianne. I'll be out of your way, unless you need anything else. No, she said. We're good. He tipped his cap slightly and left through the side door. Calvin leaned back against the counter. You and Walter, is it serious? Marianne raised an eyebrow. He's been good to me. To all of us. That's not an answer. It's not your question to ask. He nodded. Fair. Another quiet moment passed. You're wondering if there's still a place for you here, she said finally. I'm wondering if there ever was. She wiped her hands and met his eyes. There was, but it's not the same place you left. And it's not empty waiting for you to step back in. I don't expect it to be. You're going to have to rebuild, she said. One moment at a time, one conversation at a time. I will. She nodded once. Dinner came and went with small talk and laughter. Isla told a wild story about a raccoon she named Jasper, who tried to steal her peanut butter sandwich last week. Calvin listened with full attention, laughed at the right parts, asked the right questions. Renee sat across the table, quiet but not cold. After dinner, as the dishes were being cleared, Isla climbed into Calvin's lap with a folded piece of paper. I drew you something, she said, shyly. He unfolded it. It was a picture of the porch, with all of them Marianne Renee Isla, and himself drawn in crooked lines and bright colors. They were holding hands. A big sun beamed above them, and in the corner, a heart. Calvin's throat tightened. It's beautiful. She smiled. You can keep it, so you don't forget. He kissed the top of her head. I won't. Later that night, after Isla was asleep and the inn had gone quiet, Calvin stepped onto the porch alone. The swing creaked as he sat the night air warm with the scent of gardenias. The door opened behind him. Marianne joined him without a word. They sat in silence for a long time. Finally he spoke. Do you think there's still a version of us that makes sense? Her voice was soft. I think we're figuring out who we are now. And maybe that's enough. The swing rocked gently. Calvin looked out at the stars. For the first time in years, they didn't feel so far away. The next morning broke soft and golden, the kind of savanna light that slipped through the trees like it knew secrets. Calvin stood at the back fence of the garden watching Isla chase butterflies with a mason jar, her ponytail bouncing behind her like a happy ribbon. Her laughter stirred something in him, something gentle, almost childlike, something he'd buried long ago beneath numbers, deadlines, boardrooms, and broken promises. He turned at the sound of footsteps. Marianne was walking toward him with 2 cups of coffee, her hair loosely pinned up, a few strands catching the breeze. "Truce offering," she said, handing him a cup. He took it with a grateful smile. "Careful. This could make me think you're warming up to me." She raised a brow. "Don't get ahead of yourself." They stood shoulder to shoulder, watching Isla crouch beside a patch of lavender. "She asked me this morning if I had a forever room here," Calvin said. Marianne's eyebrows lifted. "She's quick. She told me she liked me being here but doesn't want me to leave without saying goodbye again. That part—" He paused, voice tight. "That part just about knocked the air out of me." "She remembers more than you think," Marianne said quietly. "She may not know the full picture, but she understands what it feels like to wait." Calvin nodded, sipping the coffee. "She trusts you, though," Marianne continued. "That's not nothing." He looked at her. "What about you?" She didn't answer right away, just kept her eyes on Isla. "Trust takes longer," she finally said. "But I don't wake up angry anymore. That's progress." He glanced down. "I'll take progress." Inside the inn, Renee stood near the front window, arms crossed. She watched them in the garden, her mother handing Calvin coffee, her daughter chasing butterflies like everything was right. Walter stepped into view beside her, wiping his hands with a rag, his expression unreadable. "She's letting him in," Renee said quietly. "She never really locked the door," Walter replied. "He just walked away, years, and now he shows up and suddenly they're peeling carrots together." Walter gave a low chuckle. "You ever think maybe it's not about him? Maybe it's about your mom finding something she didn't realize she still needed?" Renee turned to him, frustrated. "So what, I'm just supposed to sit here and watch him slide into a family he left behind?" "No," Walter said gently. "But maybe you could stop trying to control the ending before the middle's even played out." She sighed, leaning her head against the window frame. "He broke her heart," she said. Walter nodded. "He did. He doesn't get to waltz back in and fix everything with bedtime stories and porch swings." "No," Walter repeated. "But maybe he's trying to do the hard thing. Maybe he's finally sticking around for the messy part." She said nothing, only watched, as Isla ran into Calvin's arms, squealing with delight. Outside, Calvin hoisted Isla up and spun her gently before setting her down. "I caught one," she cried, holding up her mason jar proudly. He leaned down to look. "A monarch. That's a lucky catch." She nodded. "She's pretty right, beautiful," Marianne called from the porch. Lunch, everyone. Isla darted past them, eager for lemonade and grilled cheese. Calvin and Marianne followed slowly. Before stepping inside, he turned to her. "Do you ever regret it?" he asked. "What us?" "The way it ended." She thought for a long moment. "I regret that we didn't fight harder," she said. "But I don't regret walking away when it was clear I was the only one still fighting." He looked down, nodding. "But now," she added, "you're here, and you're different. So maybe what we lost back then wasn't the end of the story." Inside the dining room, lunch was already being served. Isla sat at the table with a napkin tucked into her collar, humming while she peeled the crusts off her sandwich. Renee joined them a minute later, her expression more composed, but her eyes still watchful. Calvin offered a soft smile. She nodded once. Not warm, but not cold. It was something. Later that afternoon, Calvin offered to help Walter repair the old shed door out back. Walter raised a skeptical brow. "You know which end of a hammer is which. I've held one once or twice," Calvin replied with a smile. They worked side by side in easy silence. The sound of hammering, the creak of old wood, the distant laughter of Isla, it all blended into something simple and grounding. Finally, Walter broke the quiet. "She's not just forgiving you," he said, not looking up. "She's watching to see if you'll forgive yourself." Calvin paused. "You think that's possible?" Walter met his eyes. "Only if you stop trying to erase who you were. Own it. Learn from it. Then prove you're someone worth betting on now." Calvin nodded, feeling the truth settle deep. That evening after dinner, the inn was lit, soft and warm. The porch light cast a golden glow. Isla was asleep upstairs. Renee was finishing a call in the front parlor. Marianne stood alone in the kitchen, wiping down the counter when Calvin entered. He held something in his hand. A folded note. "I found this," he said quietly, tucked in the back of the old guest book. She took it, opened it slowly. Her handwriting. Years ago, it was a list. 10 things she wanted to do when she finally felt free again. 1. Dance barefoot in the rain. 2. Make my own jam. 3. Say no without apologizing. 4. Let Isla keep the puppy. 5. Sing on an open mic night. 6. Host a dinner for people I love, no strings. 7. Wear red lipstick on a weekday. 8. Visit Maine. 9. Tell Calvin how much it hurt. 10. Forgive myself. Her hands trembled slightly. "I must have written this after you left," she said. Voice hushed. "Did you do them?" he asked. "Most." She smiled faintly, still working on the last 2. "I hope someday I can help with number 9. She looked at him, eyes filled with something tender but cautious. Maybe she said, "But it starts with showing up. Again and again. Not just for me. I'm learning." She folded the note, tucked it into her apron pocket. Then quietly she said, "Good night, Calvin." He paused. "Good night, Marianne." As she turned away, he caught a glimpse of the woman he once knew, and the one she'd become. Stronger, wiser, still holding the door open just enough to see if he meant what he said. And this time, he did. The next morning began with a light drizzle that left a shimmer on the rose bushes and painted the garden walkways in slick gray tones. Calvin stood under the wide awning of the porch, coffee in hand, watching the mist roll off the edges of the roof, like quiet thoughts sliding into memory. The inn was quieter than usual. Guests had checked out earlier, and the only sounds were the soft shuffle of Delia prepping breakfast and the occasional creak of the old pipes beneath the floor. He had just taken his first sip when the screen door opened behind him. Marianne stepped out barefoot, wearing a knit sweater over her dress hair still damp from the shower. She didn't say anything at first, just took in the quiet, the mist, the way the rain seemed to hush the whole world. "You ever think about how rain resets things?" she asked softly. Calvin turned to her, surprised by the poetry of the moment. "I used to hate it. Delayed flights, wetsuits, schedules ruined." She smiled faintly. "I used to dance in it when I thought no one was looking." He looked at her, really looked. "Why'd you stop?" "I guess I started caring too much about who might be watching." A beat passed between them. Then she turned toward him, arms crossed against the morning chill. "You staying tonight?" He nodded. "Unless I'm in the way." "You're not." She started back inside, but paused in the doorway. "Come with me. I want to show you something." He followed her through the house and into the office, once Calvin's study, now transformed. The dark cherry desk had been replaced with a bright white one. The shelves, once lined with legal pads and finance books, were now filled with wedding albums, guest books, local artisan catalogs. She pulled open a drawer and took out a thin leather binder. "This," she said, "is the event schedule through fall. And I need someone who can help handle the overflow." Calvin looked at her, startled. "You're offering me a job, I'm offering you responsibility," she said plainly. "The kind that doesn't come with a boardroom or a private jet. The kind you can't walk away from. He opened the binder. Notes in her handwriting covered nearly every page. Names, timelines, custom menu requests. "I don't know anything about weddings," he said. "You know how to listen. You've been doing a lot of that lately." He looked up. "Why me?" She didn't blink. "Because part of you always wanted to build something real. You just didn't know how to stay in one place long enough to do it." He closed the binder slowly. "Then maybe it's time I learn." Marianne gave a small nod, the faintest flicker of approval crossing her features. As they exited the office, Delia waved them down from the kitchen. "Renee's taking Isla to the library this afternoon. She mentioned wanting to talk to you." Calvin felt the nerves stir again. Marianne caught the flicker in his eyes. "She's still deciding how much space to give you. Be patient, I will." Later that day, he found Renee in the parking area buckling Isla into the back seat of her hybrid SUV. A tote bag filled with picture books and juice boxes sat on the passenger side. Calvin approached slowly. Renee glanced up. "Library trip. Thought you might want to tag along." "I'd like that." Isla clapped from the back seat. Story time. As they drove, Savannah blurred by in shades of green and gold. The rain had stopped, and the city had that freshly washed look like someone had wiped the edges clean. Inside the library, Isla raced to the children's section, while Renee and Calvin settled near a small window overlooking the courtyard. Renee broke the silence first. "She's already drawing you in her family portraits." He swallowed. "I've noticed. She told me last night that you laugh like the man on the coffee commercial. You know, the one with the golden retriever and the barn." He chuckled. "I've heard worse." "She likes you," Renee said, "which means I need to know what your intentions really are." He met her eyes. "To be in her life, every day, not just the special ones." "And with my mother?" He hesitated. "I don't know where that's going. I'm not pushing it. I'm here for Isla. Everything else, if it happens, it'll be because it's right for her." Renee nodded slowly. "I still don't trust you," she said plainly. "I don't expect you to, but I want to earn your trust, however long that takes." She studied him. "She's been through enough, Calvin. Don't give her hope if you're not staying." "I'm not going anywhere," he said. They both looked over at Isla, who was now holding up a book twice her size to a group of stuffed animals seated in a circle. She was reading aloud with dramatic flair. "She gets that from your side," Renee said, lips curving into a reluctant smile. They returned to the inn that evening just as the sun was sinking behind the live oaks. The porch glowed again with that familiar warmth, as if the house itself had learned to breathe again. Calvin walked Isla up to her room. At the door, she tugged on his sleeve. "Will you be here tomorrow?" "I will." She held up a tiny pinky finger. "Promise." He hooked his with hers. "Promise." She smiled, then ran inside. Back downstairs, Marianne stood in the kitchen stirring something on the stove. He stepped in quietly. "Dinner smells good," he said. "Chicken pot pie, Walter's favorite." "Ah," he said. "So he's staying for dinner," she said, not looking up. "But that's not a question you should ask in that tone." He held up his hands. "Noted." They stood in silence for a moment, the only sound the bubbling of the pot and the low hum of the ceiling fan. Then she asked, "Do you want to join us?" Calvin nodded. "If it's okay with everyone." She glanced at him, then back to the pot. "Set the table. 4 plates." He moved to the cupboard, pulling down the mismatched dishes, placing them carefully on the wooden table worn with time and laughter, and hard days survived. And as the 4 of them sat down that night, Marianne, Calvin, Renee, and Isla, something fragile but real began to take root. It wasn't perfect, but it was starting to feel possible. The following morning carried the scent of lemon zest and warm biscuits through the inn's kitchen. Calvin sat at the small table by the window, flipping through the wedding binder Marianne had left him. His coffee had long gone cold, but he didn't notice. His mind was still turning over last night, the meal, the laughter, the subtle unspoken shifts in energy. Something had changed. Something real. Renee had stayed at the table after Isla went to bed. She hadn't said much, but she hadn't left either. And Marianne, she hadn't avoided him. She hadn't leaned in, but she hadn't shut down. It felt like a door had opened just wide enough for light to come through. The screen door creaked open. Marianne stepped in from the garden cheeks, pink from the morning chill, a small bundle of rosemary and lavender tucked in her arms. "You're up early," she said, setting the herbs on the counter. "Couldn't sleep?" Calvin replied. "My brain's still learning how to handle silence." She glanced at him. "You're doing better than I thought you would." He offered a half smile. "I take that as high praise." She poured herself a cup of coffee and leaned against the counter eyes, scanning the binder in front of him. "You actually reading that thing front to back, twice." Marianne laughed lightly, and for a moment it softened the space between them. "Then I guess it's time," she said, "for what to see what you've learned." She reached into a drawer and pulled out a folder marked Meadow Ridge Wedding. Sat. "Rehearsal dinners tonight," she said. "The caterer canceled on short notice, and I promised the bride's mother we'd make it work. I'll handle decor and timing. You'll manage the food." His eyes widened. "You want me to oversee, not cook?" she clarified. "We're using a local vendor, but they'll need someone to coordinate deliveries and plating, especially since I'll be juggling the ceremony details." Calvin nodded slowly. "All right, I'm in." She started to walk past him, then stopped, resting a hand lightly on his shoulder. "It's a test, but not the kind you're used to. No one's looking for perfection here, just presence." He looked up at her. "Then I'll show up. Fully." Later that afternoon, the inn hummed with quiet energy. Votive candles lined the patio tables, soft music played through the garden speakers, and folding chairs formed neat rows beneath a canopy of oak trees wrapped in twinkle lights. Calvin stood at the catering table, clipboard in hand, checking off each item as it arrived. Deviled eggs with bacon jam, mini crab cakes, cucumber tea sandwiches, iced sweet tea in mason jars. A local high school senior named Cody was helping plate and run trays, eager to earn tips for his college fund. "You're a lifesaver," Cody said, balancing a tray of canapes. "I'm not sure about that," Calvin replied. "But I'll take competent." From across the lawn he saw Marianne walking toward him, wearing a soft navy dress, and her hair curled loosely around her shoulders. She didn't look like the woman he used to know. She looked better, more herself. "How's it going?" she asked. "No fires? No angry mothers?" "I think we're holding steady." She glanced around approvingly. "You didn't miss a single detail. Turns out managing logistics isn't so different from mergers and acquisitions, just with more cake." She smiled, and a lot more emotion. The laughter and chatter around them swelled as guests began to settle into their seats. Renee approached with Isla in tow, both dressed up, Renee in a sleek forest green dress, Isla in a yellow sundress with tiny sunflowers embroidered along the hem. Isla ran to Calvin and tugged his hand. "Come sit with us. I'll join you in a bit, sweetheart. I've got to make sure the lemonade doesn't disappear." She pouted dramatically, then brightened. "Okay, but save me a cookie. I promise." As Isla skipped back toward the tables, Calvin turned to Renee. "You look great. Don't read too much into it. she said, adjusting her clutch. This was hanging in the back of my closet. Still suits you. She gave him a long look, then nodded once. You did good today. It wasn't warm praise, but it wasn't cold either. After the toasts and laughter faded into the hum of background music, and the caterers began clearing the last of the plates, Marianne pulled Calvin aside near the back steps of the inn. She held a wine glass in her hand, but hadn't touched it. You made tonight easier than it should have been, she said. Thank you. He studied her. This place, it's more than just where you live. It's who you became. She looked out at the lanterns glowing in the trees. It saved me. Not the house, the work, the rhythm, the roots. I'm starting to see that, he said quietly. That maybe what I thought was success was just noise. And that here, even in the quiet, there's more life than I ever had in all my skyscrapers. She turned toward him then, and something shifted in her eyes. Do you still love me, Calvin? The question cut through the air like a hush before a storm. He didn't flinch. I never stopped. She let the silence hang, let the words settle. Then softly, that's not enough, you know. I know. It has to look like something, like dishes done without being asked, like bedtime stories read even when you're tired, like showing up to the hard days. I want to learn, he said, if you'll let me. She took a step back, putting a little distance between them. Then start with this, she said. Don't just say it. Show it. Again and again and again. I will. Good, she whispered. Because if you disappear again, I won't let her go through that twice. She didn't wait for him to reply. She just walked back toward the inn heels, clicking softly on the flagstone hair swaying with the breeze. And Calvin stood there in the twilight, not crushed by the warning, but lifted by the chance. Because sometimes love wasn't a reunion. Sometimes it was the long road back. The morning sun filtered gently through the gauzy curtains of the guest room, casting soft light across the floorboards, where Calvin's shoes rested side by side. He stood at the window tying his watch back onto his wrist, not because he had somewhere urgent to be, but because it still gave him a sense of structure. Even here, even now, in a world that moved slower and asked more of the heart than the head. Downstairs, the sounds of breakfast were already in motion, dishes clinking a low hum of conversation, the scent of biscuits and berry compote wafting upward like a quiet invitation. He smiled to himself. It was the kind of smell that reminded you someone was home. He pulled on a sweater, ran a hand through his hair, and headed downstairs. Aikla was already at the table, cheeks full of biscuit, her drawing pad spread open beside her. She waved the moment she saw him. I saved you a seat. Calvin sat beside her. That was very thoughtful of you. I made you in my picture today, she said, turning the page toward him. There he was, tall in a blue sweater, like the one he wore now, standing beside Isla and Marianne beneath a big tree with orange leaves. In the background, a small house with a porch swing. You even got the swing, he said. Isla beamed. It's your favorite right. He looked at her heart, full. It really is. Marianne walked in, then apron tied around her waist, a flower smudge on her cheek. She caught sight of the drawing, paused for half a second, and then smiled one of those quiet smiles that carried both joy and hesitation. Looks like you've been busy, sweetheart. I told Grandpa I'm going to draw us every day until he never leaves. The words hit the table with soft weight. Marianne didn't answer immediately. Calvin glanced at her but stayed silent, letting the moment settle where it landed. From the hallway, Renee's voice echoed in. Mom, the florist called. They're missing 24 white hydrangeas for the Sunday brunch event. Marianne sighed. Of course they are. She handed Calvin a folded receipt. You up for a field trip, hydrangeas and lavender? The market's got both if you get there early. I'm on it, he said, rising from the table. Isla tugged his sleeve. Can I come too? Marianne gave her a look. Only if you change out of your pajamas first. Isla squealed and ran upstairs. Calvin chuckled. You sure you trust me with her? Marianne wiped her hands on her apron. I think you've proven you know how to bring her back safe. Minutes later, they were driving along one of Savannah's winding back roads, windows down, radio playing low. Isla sat in the back seat with a bag of cheddar crackers and a toy rabbit tucked under her arm. She pointed out every horse squirrel and oddly shaped cloud she could see. That one looks like a pizza, and that one like a goose in a hat. Calvin laughed. You've got a wild imagination. I get it from Mommy, she said proudly. Then, after a moment, her voice softened. Do you think I'm like you too? He looked at her in the rearview mirror, taken aback. I hope so, he said. I hope you got the best parts. She thought for a moment, then said, I think maybe I did. They reached the market just as vendors were finishing setup. Calvin took Isla's hand, and they strolled from stall to stall, collecting bunches of white hydrangeas, sprigs of lavender, and a small jar of honey Isla insisted they needed for the pancakes, duh. At one booth, an elderly vendor eyed Calvin with a familiar squint. You're Marianne's ex, the woman said plainly. Calvin froze. Isla blinked up at her. He's my grandpa. The woman softened a bit. Well, folks talk. Said you were some big shot from up north. Walked out and never looked back. Calvin's throat tightened, but he nodded. That's fair. She studied him, then gave a small shrug. And yet here you are. Buying flowers for your girl's brunch? Life's funny that way. He managed a smile. It really is. They made it back just before lunch. Calvin unloaded the flowers onto the prep table, while Isla raced inside yelling, We got the prettiest ones. Marianne appeared in the doorway, drying her hands. You two made quite the impression at the market. Oh, Calvin asked. She raised an eyebrow. Margie Jenkins called. Said she saw you buying hydrangeas with my granddaughter and asked if we were back together. He sighed. Small towns. Fast gossip. She stepped into the kitchen, setting a basket of napkins on the counter. I told her we were figuring things out. His heart thudded. And are we? I don't know, she said. But I'm not slamming any doors. That's something, isn't it? He nodded. It's everything. Just then, Renee walked in, clipboard in hand. We've got a situation. Marianne turned. What now? The event planner for Sunday just called. Her assistant quit, and they're asking if we can step in to help coordinate. Timeline music seating. Marianne groaned. That's a full-time job. I can take it, Calvin said. Both women turned to him. You sure? Marianne asked. I know the schedule. I've worked with teams bigger than this. And he paused, looking at her carefully. I want to prove I'm not just good for flower runs and lemonade. Renee looked at her mom. Marianne considered for a moment, then gave a slow nod. All right, she said. Let's see what you can do. As Renee handed over the planner, their fingers brushed for just a second. Nothing romantic, but something unspoken passed between them. A test exchanged, a weight shared. That night Calvin sat on the porch swing again. Not out of nostalgia, but habit. Comfort. He was starting to understand why she loved this place. The porch didn't just face the world, it welcomed it. Marianne joined him, 2 mugs in hand. She handed him one. Chamomile. He sipped, grateful. Thank you. They sat for a while in silence. Finally, she said, You've been good with her. I'm trying. She doesn't just love easily, she added. She watches. She waits. I know. Marianne looked at him. So do I. He nodded, the air between them thick with things neither wanted to rush. You're not the man I divorced, she said. I hope not. You still carry him with you, she said. But you're not him. Calvin looked out over the yard, then back at her. I want to stay, he said quietly. Not in the guest room, not just at the inn. I want to belong again, to something that matters. She studied him. We're not there yet. I'm not asking for that, he said. I'm asking for the chance to keep showing up. She smiled faintly, eyes soft. Then show up for Sunday, she said. And let's see what kind of man you really are. The porch swing creaked gently as they rocked together in silence, and the stars above them blinked patiently like they'd seen this story before. Two people trying to start again, one quiet moment at a time. The sun rose slow and golden over the inn on Sunday morning, casting long streaks of light across the dew-covered lawn. Inside the place buzzed with quiet purpose. Folded napkins, chairs dragged into perfect rose glassware, catching the light like little prisms of expectation. Calvin stood in the back room, tying a tie in the mirror. It wasn't his usual style, navy blue clean, simple. But today wasn't about style. It was about showing up. Outside voices murmured, laughter floated in. The guests had begun arriving. He checked the seating chart one last time. Then the timeline. The planner in his hand was creased at the edges, marked with notes in his handwriting, her handwriting. Side by side. At 10 minutes to showtime, he stepped into the main space. Marianne stood at the front, clipboard against her chest, hair pinned up neatly. She turned the second she felt him near. You're early, she said. I wanted to make sure everything was ready. It is, she replied then, after a pause. You are. The words hit something deep. She handed him a small envelope. For you. He opened it carefully. Inside was a simple photo. Him and Isla taken just a few days ago. She was laughing, her arms around his neck. He looked content. She had it printed, Marianne said quietly. She said you didn't have any pictures of yourself that looked like love. He swallowed hard. I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything. Just keep showing up. He slipped the photo into his inside pocket. Then, just before he turned to take his place by the arbor, Marianne touched his sleeve. There's one more thing, she said. Her eyes held something tenderness and something heavier. I need to ask you a question, and I need the truth. Okay. Did you ever sign off on a sperm bank donation in your early 20s for medical research or something like that? He blinked, stunned. I think so. I was broke in college. A friend dragged me with him. They paid $100. Why Marianne's face was unreadable. Then she said it soft but unwavering. Isla was conceived with a donor. I never knew who. But last night I found the name. Calvin's breath caught. What you're listed in the original file. Number and all. I checked twice. He couldn't find words. I didn't know. Not then. Not when I married you. Not when I left. Calvin's world tilted. His hands trembled. You're saying, she's mine. Marianne nodded slowly. All the years, all the aching questions, the strange pull he'd felt toward Isla that he couldn't explain. It all made sense. Too much sense. I don't know what this means yet, she whispered. But I thought you deserved to know before we stood here smiling for strangers, pretending like none of it mattered. He looked out the window where Isla was running barefoot across the grass with a paper fan. Tears welled in his eyes. I don't want to pretend, he said. I want to start over for real this time. She didn't say anything, just stepped aside so he could pass. And as Calvin walked toward the arbor, toward the start of the day's celebration, his heart beat not with fear, but with purpose. Because everything had just changed. And this time he wasn't running. The brunch went on around him, music softly drifting through the air, the hum of guests enjoying food and conversation. But Calvin moved like he was underwater. He smiled where he needed to. He passed hors d'oeuvres. He checked timelines, adjusted settings, refilled pitchers. But inside, everything was shifting, rearranging. She's mine. That truth pulsed through his veins louder than the music, louder than the polite chatter and clinking silverware. He caught sight of Isla near the garden steps, crouched down carefully inspecting a ladybug crawling across her fingertip. A moment so ordinary, and yet it felt monumental now. Sacred. He stepped away from the crowd, needing air, needing space. The far edge of the garden gave way to a grove of trees, a little bench tucked beneath a weeping willow. He sat hands clasped, elbows on knees. It wasn't the shock that got him, it was the realization of all the time he'd missed. First steps, first words, fevers in the night, pancakes with too much syrup. A rustle behind him. Marianne. She stood a few feet away, arms folded, her gaze unreadable. "I figured you'd need a minute," she said. "I'm trying to keep it together," he replied quietly. "You don't have to with me." He looked up at her, eyes tired. "Do you remember the night we signed the divorce papers? You told me I was too used to walking away when things got hard." She nodded once. "You were right," he said. "But I'm not walking now." Marianne sat beside him, not close, but close enough. "I thought about never telling you," she admitted. "I was scared. Not of you. Just of opening something that had finally healed." He turned to her. "But you did." She met his gaze. "Because she deserves the truth. And so do you." A silence fell thick with unspoken memories. Then he asked, "What does this mean, Marianne?" For her, I don't have an answer yet," she said honestly. "We take it slow. We keep showing up. We let Isla guide us." He nodded, the weight in his chest shifting. Not lighter, but more settled. More grounded. "I want to be her father," he said. "Not in name only. Not on paper. I want her to know I'm here. You'll have to earn that," she said, but gently. "I know." She reached into her pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. A crayon drawing Isla's clearly. 3 stick figures holding hands under a giant heart. She made this last night. Said it was for her dream family. Calvin's throat tightened. "She doesn't know," Marianne said. "Not yet. I wanted to tell you first, to see what you would do." He took the drawing carefully, like it might tear under the weight of what it meant. "I'll do whatever it takes," he whispered. Marianne stood. "Then start by coming back to the table. Not as a guest, not as someone trying to impress, just as someone who belongs." He looked up at her, eyes rimmed with emotion. "I can do that." She offered him a hand. He took it. The late afternoon sun dipped low, casting a soft amber hue across the inn's wraparound porch. The event was winding down, empty glasses, stacked neatly on trays, plates, scraped clean guests, lingering with laughter that had softened into that warm, contented quiet that only comes after a meaningful day. Calvin sat on the porch swing, Isla curled beside him with her head resting on his arm, a coloring book balanced on her knees. "Do you think bees ever get tired of flying?" she asked suddenly, her voice dreamy. He smiled. "Maybe. But I think they rest on flowers when they need a break," she nodded thoughtfully. "I think I'm your flower. You rest with me." His throat closed for a moment, too full to speak. He kissed the top of her head instead. Behind them, the screen door creaked open. Marianne stepped out, her eyes scanning the lawn before settling on them. Her posture relaxed just a little. I made lemonade, she said, holding 2 glasses. The good kind with the mint. Calvin took one with a nod of thanks, watching her sit on the wooden rocker nearby. There was something new in the way she looked at him now, less guarded, but not naive. Like she was learning him all over again with care. Renee's inside helping Ella with the books, Marianne said. She's surprisingly good at numbers. I'm not surprised, Calvin said. She's sharp. Too sharp, Marianne muttered with a smile. She called me out this morning. Oh, she asked if I was falling for you again, or just remembering the parts that were easy to love. He glanced at her. And what did you say? Marianne traced the rim of her glass with 1 finger. I told her I wasn't sure. That maybe it's not about falling at all this time. Maybe it's about choosing. Calvin let that sit for a beat. I've made a lot of wrong choices, he admitted. But not coming here. That wasn't one of them. She looked at him, then really looked, and in her eyes was that flicker again. The one that said hope was dangerous, but not impossible. I need you to be steady, she said. Not perfect, not flashy. Just steady. I can do that, he replied. For you. For her. Marianne leaned back her gaze, lifting to the sky. When I found out about the donor match, I didn't know what to feel. Shock, sure. But also, peace. Like the universe had been writing this story longer than either of us realized. Calvin nodded slowly. I felt that too. Like, all the noise before was just the prelude. Isla stirred beside him and sat up, rubbing her eyes. Can I have a cookie now? Marianne smiled. 1. And only if you share it with Grandpa. The word hit Calvin square in the chest, soft but seismic. Isla jumped up and padded inside. He turned to Marianne, voice low. Was that on purpose? She shrugged, but there was warmth in her smirk. She's been calling you that behind your back for days. His heart swelled. I never thought I'd hear it. Well, she said she's been waiting for you to earn it. Kids are funny like that. Calvin leaned forward, elbows on his knees, watching the last rays of sun stretch long across the yard. I want to build something real here. Not just with her, with you too, if you'll let me. Marianne didn't answer right away. Then she reached out and took his hand. Not tightly. Just enough. I'm not making any promises tonight, she said. That's okay, but I'll keep sitting here with you. He turned to her, their hands resting between them like a new language waiting to be spoken. Then I'm not going anywhere, he whispered. The porch creaked beneath them. Fireflies blinked across the lawn, and for the first time in a long time, it felt like the beginning. Monday morning came quietly, with the kind of soft light that made everything feel slower, softer. The guests were gone. The chairs had been stacked tablecloths, laundered and folded. The inn was still again just family now. Calvin stood at the edge of the property watching the workers replant the tree that had come down during last month's storm. Marianne had ordered a new oak sapling, tall and young, its roots wrapped gently in burlap. Watching it lowered into the earth, he felt something stir deep inside. A strange, aching hope. Looks good, doesn't it? Renee stepped up beside him, arms crossed over her chest. He nodded. Solid roots. She raised an eyebrow at him. Funny, that's exactly what I told Mom when she asked whether she should let you stay. Calvin glanced at her, careful not to respond too quickly. She said, "You've changed," Renee added. "That you're showing up in ways you never did before. I'm trying to be the man I should have been a long time ago." She looked at him hard. "Just so you know, this isn't about second chances with my mom. This is about Isla, about whether you're going to stick around when the days aren't easy." Calvin didn't flinch. "I'm not walking out again." Renee studied him, and something in her expression eased just slightly. "I believe you mean that," she said. "And for what it's worth, she's different too. Softer. Since you've been here." They stood in silence a while longer until the workers finished brushing dirt from their gloves. The new oak stood tall against the morning sky. Later in the kitchen, Calvin found Marianne humming softly as she cleaned out the fridge. Sunlight spilled through the windows, glinting off her earrings. She looked peaceful at home in her rhythm. He leaned against the doorway, arms crossed. "You always hum when you're happy." She paused, glanced back at him. "I hum when I feel safe." He smiled. "Then I'm glad I came back." She wiped her hands on a dish towel. "I wasn't sure you'd fit back in. I'd spent so many years imagining this place without you." But now he asked. She looked at him fully now, the weight of everything they'd walked through sitting quietly between them. "Now I'm learning not to imagine anything. Just take it as it comes." A small voice piped up from the stairs. Grandpa Isla padded down in mismatched socks and a crooked braid, holding a sheet of paper in one hand. "I made a family tree," she said proudly, placing it on the table. Calvin and Marianne both leaned in. There were stick figures labeled carefully in block letters, "Mom, me, Grandma Ella, Aunt Renee." And at the very top, in big pink letters, was, "My Grandpa Calvin." He stared at the paper like it was holy. "I didn't know where to put you at first," Isla explained. "But then Mommy said roots go deep, even if you don't see them right away." Marianne caught his gaze. Her eyes shimmered. "Thank you," he said softly, crouching to Isla's level. "This is the best thing anyone's ever made for me." She beamed, then threw her arms around his neck. In that embrace, he felt everything he'd spent years chasing in boardrooms and penthouses: purpose, peace, love. The kind that stays. The kind that takes root. As they stood together, Calvin looked over her shoulder at Marianne. "I want to make a life here," he said quietly. She nodded once, slowly. "Then let's keep building." Autumn settled into Savannah like a secret, the kind that whispered through the trees and curled around the edges of windows. Leaves had begun to scatter across the front porch of the inn, painting it in shades of gold and burnt orange. The days were shorter, now cooler, calmer. Calvin stood beneath the newly planted oak tree, his hands buried in the pockets of a flannel jacket that Marianne had once teased was too local for a man who used to wear suits to breakfast. The air smelled like cinnamon and turned soil. Inside the inn was humming again, booked solid for the fall season. But out here, it was still. Quiet. Footsteps crunched softly behind him. Marianne approached her own mug of tea, warming her hands. "She's asleep?" he asked, eyes still on the tree. "Out like a light. Story time wore her out. She made me read that book you bought her 3 times. She's testing my endurance." "She's testing your consistency," Marianne corrected gently. "And your passing." He smiled faintly. "She called me Grandpa again at school pickup, in front of her whole class." Marianne looked over, amused. "Embarrassed proud?" he said, voice barely above a whisper. "More than I knew I could be." A breeze moved through the branches above, lifting a few leaves loose. One floated down and landed near his feet. "I have something for you," she said, setting her tea down on the porch rail. She reached into the pocket of her cardigan and pulled out a small box square and wrapped in a strip of blue linen ribbon. Calvin stared at it. "It's not my birthday." "I know. Just open it." He undid the ribbon carefully, lifting the lid. Inside was a key, small brass, well-worn. His brow furrowed. "What's this? To the apartment above the inn," she said softly. "We finished renovating it last week. New floors, full kitchen. Your name's on the lease if you want it." He didn't speak, just held the key in his palm like it weighed more than it should. "I'm not asking for promises," she added. "This isn't about picking up where we left off. This is about building something honest, something steady. And if this isn't what you want, I'll understand." Calvin looked up at her. The woman who had once been the hardest goodbye of his life now stood in front of him, offering something deeper than a second chance. She was offering trust. "I do want it," he said. "But not because it's convenient, not because I feel guilty." "Then why?" "Because I've never felt more certain of who I want to become. And that man belongs here." She nodded once, tears just beginning to gloss over her eyes. He stepped closer, hesitating just a breath away. "And you?" She looked at him, through the dusk, a soft smile tugging at the corner of her lips. "I never stopped rooting for you," she said. "Even when I couldn't let you stay." The silence between them thickened, full, not heavy. And in that silence, a kind of understanding passed between them. No need to say more. No need to rush. From inside the house, a small voice called out. "Grandpa, you forgot your book." Calvin turned toward the porch, then looked back at Marianne. "I guess I'd better not keep my editor waiting." She laughed, wiping at her cheek. "Go on. I'll meet you upstairs." He turned and jogged up the steps, taking them two at a time. Isla stood at the top, holding the worn paperback like a treasure. "You always forget," she teased, handing it over. "I'm old," he said with mock drama. "Memory's the first to go." She took his hand. "You remember the important stuff." Together they walked inside the door, clicking softly behind them. Later that night, after the house had gone quiet and the wind had picked up again, Calvin sat by the window in the upstairs apartment. The new home. His home. The key sat on the windowsill, glinting in the lamplight. Below he could just make out the oak tree swaying in the wind, young, still growing. But it was planted deep now. It would hold. He leaned back, closed his eyes. For the first time in years, he wasn't searching. He was staying. And that made all the difference.